Well, hello, everybody. Happy Friday. We're back. Dong's in the house, and we are joined by the one and only Mr. Justin Credabel. We've just been discussing he's not the wrestler that I kept finding when I was doing some Google searching on him the other day.
I was captain of my high school wrestling team, though.
Oh, okay.
Just put that caveat out there.
Okay. So we're having a Go Goni Friday afternoon / evening chat today with the man himself, Justin Credabel. For those of you that might not have seen it before, I'm sure you've seen it in the store at some point. The old Justin Credabel's Goniopower. There we go.
Oh. Nice, thank you for that.
So we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking about what's in that tub for sure. So Justin, thanks for joining us. You are the Goni man, the go-to Goni man, along with other things. But you've been on this gig for a fair time. I'm not going to ask you how old you are because I've been doing a little bit of, like I say, a little bit of digging. Went through your Facebook page, just to, you know. And as you rightly said this evening, there are no dumb questions, only stupid answers.
This is good for that.
I take it that was during lockdown. Clearly, lots of potato chips.
Yeah, you did your research. This is awesome.
I did my research. I do. I got the good stuff tonight. Yes. So we're going to be talking everything Goni. As we said briefly in the green room, I think it is a bit of a dark art. Some people have a lot of success. Some people struggle and kind of avoid them a little bit as a coral and sort of gravitate to other corals that they've had a little bit more success with. And in the UK, they can be a little bit pricey. They are tending to be a little bit of a collectible sort of Pokemon sort of thing going on with the naming. I know the Acropora have always been famous for that, but I think Gonis are certainly at the minute, or have been fairly recently in the UK, one of the corals that people are trying to collect for the names, maybe not for other reasons, because they've got to have it, got to have them all, as they say.
Yeah.
But you're going to answer. You're happy to answer lots of questions from the live audience today regarding Goniopora. Like I say, you've got 100%. And as you said in the green room, you're missing Gonis at the minute because you don't currently have a reef tank because you spend your time in the reef. Is that right?
In the reef, yes, I do. And in the other reef. So.
Okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely thrilling to play with these. Yeah, I guess it could be worse. Yeah, and it's like I'm playing with the Atlantic species of hard coral, which are kind of in their own right, like a little bit of a black box, but still it's like some stuff applies, but there's ones with their own individual intricacies. So it's just been a really pretty rad experience. Challenging at times, but that's there's still frontiers we're hitting with those. So it keeps me excited.
Good. Well, as I said, as your face depicts here, there are no dumb questions tonight. So if you've got any questions for the one and only Mr. Justin Credabel, please fire them in the live comment section and we'll do our best to shout them out. Right, let's go straight in and say good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world that have joined us this Friday. Here we are. Elise Sa is with us. Good afternoon, my dear. Hope you're good. EIY Kumar is with us as well. So is John Wright. Mr. Wright, thanks for tuning in. Fish Ventura. Attack Custom Baits, hope you're good. Mo's Reef is with us in the house. Reef Rondo, hello Ronaldo, hope you're good. Techers is with us. So is Harry West, nice to see you. Milot, hope you're good. Sam Parker is with us from Down Under, hope you're good, Sam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're good. Mr. Senna is in the house. Impatient Reefer is with us as well. Donald Smith, happy Friday. Lee, hope you're good. Nice to see you in the comments. Thanks for the support. Anthony, UKM 120. Critical Reef, hope you're good. Gazazazaza, hope you're good. Thanks for tuning in. Who else we got in here? A few people talking amongst themselves. Dave Reef, hello. So is Prime Corals. Thanks for tuning in. Immers, good evening. Happy Friday to you. Dirt Devils Reef, hello. Murphy's even with us as well. Probably 10 beers in. I'm catching him up. Banana Rama is with us. He's actually, do you know what? To be fair, he's coming with me. He's coming to my house tomorrow, Dong, to help me replace all the frags that have gone out today. So he's going to be a busy boy tomorrow. Yes, we're going to get him working once for all. But yes, good evening, Thomas. Good evening, Banana Rama. Stephen Owen, nice to see you. Lovely to see you at the Reef Meet at AAC. Well done for getting the voucher. Hope you spent it wisely. Chris is with us. Here we are. Orange Reef, economical reef, should I say. Good evening. Hi Dong, LT Reefer. What else we've got in here? Have I missed anybody? Yazan Reef. Hello. And we've got Mark from Ocean Sea Waves as well. Good evening, afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. There we go.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to start with a very easy one. Who is Justin Credabel? Give us a bit of
an enigma wrapped in a puzzle. But hi. Well, I was born and raised in Connecticut. Not the place you would assume to get into coral. I just always been into fish tanks. After when I was 6, my fish killed all my siblings' fish and survived. And that blue gourami, and then since then, I had a fish room basement at 11. So, thanks mom and dad for letting me get away with that and do that. And then late 90s, started getting into saltwater stuff and then corals, and then it was just over from there. And then just been working in the industry and different functions and ways. In the last 2 years now, I've been working for Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium's Coral Restoration Research Program. So that's been quite the workout.
And there seems to be a symbiotic relationship between, I said this in the green room to you earlier, between reefing and music. So you've had hits with Fragalicious, yeah.
Goniopora, yeah. So,
okay.
There's a few out there, yeah. And it was kind of like both of my careers kind of like spun up at the same time too. So yeah, and that was the funny story. Our band, Incognito Self Love, we ended up getting a independent record contract. About the same time when the mortgage crisis was hitting in, and the grants that were supporting the work I was doing were kind of like falling by the wayside because all the rich people were losing their money. And then, but it was like, it's like, well, we got this offer to move out to California. Let me explore that. And then what's out in LA, but also all the big wholesalers and stuff. So again, independent record label, you're not hitting the big time, but, so it was, each could support each other. But I really definitely got the LA trial by fire, like how to, those big places, giant, big warehouses, they're almost the size of a football field, just massive amounts of animals and everything coming through. And as well as the fact that these places wanted coral aquaculture sides of their businesses. Just the way the winds were going, back then, and the 2008 to 2012, it was a lot of this and that with the different sightings being open and closed, and everyone kind of saw the writing on the wall. But it's like, well, here's an economical way. This is it. Either way, it worked out really well for me. I got to just do what I like to do, which is grow coral, with a little bit of forward facing to clients and whatnot when it had to happen. But we were just moving on gobs of corals out, but yeah, this point of pride, I was able to kind of really cut my teeth on that industrial scale coral farming.
So why Gonis then? Why Gonis?
I kind of fell into it. So
okay.
So the good old days of healthy mom and pop shop. So I started working at Fin and Feather 2000, and then Fin and Feather in Groton. There's a lot of Fin and Feather, but yeah, it's the good old days. And they had saltwater stuff, and then some coral stuff, and then that was back when you would do 20 coral box, and then in these coral boxes there was always a Goni or two or this or that. And then I was an ethical retailer, so back then that was just all Gonis die. So I just I always held them. And then and we only had a 90-gallon kind of display aquarium, which was actually the first aquarium we sold out of. And then the fish room started doing better over the next couple of years. We started building up our saltwater side, but super heavy on the reef. But just had this 90-gallon semi-Berlin style aquarium. Still no skimmer really, and I was just doing feeding. But I would hold back coral, all Gonis. I wouldn't sell Goni until I could start keeping them. And that was when I was like, maybe And then kind of working backwards from that, it was like, all right, why was I successful? Like, why are other people successful? Can I like try to science the in between about that? You know, a big part is like obviously nutrition, you know, as well as like, you know, obviously you have your nitrogen, phosphorus kind of things, alkalinity, calcium, you know, what are the other stuff? And this is even before anyone's really considering, like at that point there are hints of, is it iron, is it this or that? We'll go on that in a bit, but I started working backward. You know, either way, I was doing really good with these corals. They were growing in my tank, and then I started fragging them, started growing them out, and then over the next couple of years, I started working backwards with every species I had. You know, identifying them down to the species, to the best of the ability of the science at hand. Just basically mostly observational of the coralite. Like you had to bleach out, you had to sacrifice a few polyps so you can see the actual skeleton, and then seeing what species like to eat what. And you know, there would be different stuff, but the biggest thing was like, you know, it was kind of a healthy tank. I fed a lot. My parameters are pretty on point. You know, like the main thing I was, you know, shout out to Bob Stark, ESV. I was doing the Bionic 2-part. Like I guarantee that like kind of really helped set a base too, because he includes a lot of trace elements. And yeah, and I just, as long as I wasn't overfeeding, I was feeding as much as I could. But yeah, so then these things were growing, and then I started getting a little bit more confident about it. And then purposely trying to bring in different ones and writing songs about it after that.
Well, did you ever sing the songs to them? Did that stimulate any growth? Did
I'm
you see any coloration?
I'm trying to get there. I still feel weird talking to my computer, or even animals. You know,
you can't tell me that you and Dong don't talk to corals.
I do like more of a mind meld. I do like a real big,
okay.
like, especially if I mess up, like, sorry, you know, it's like drop it on the ground and wash it off. But
well, it's an interactive podcast, and I know we're going to go here, there, and everywhere. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of a plan in place, but we're going to go straight to the questions. Good question here from SJ Charles. A few people asking about this. Gonis, photosynthetic, put my teeth back in, sorry, or not? If not, why do they extend in light and contract at night? Good question.
They are definitely photosynthetics. They do have the symbiotum zooxanthellae symbiont in there. So far as we know, there aren't any non-photosynthetic ones. And then probably the big reason why they contract at night is probably nocturnal predators, certain fish and stuff. And then different corals kind of have like optimized day-night settings, and some do sleep. You know, new studies just came out right now that like jellyfish sleep and whatnot. That's a whole another thing. We don't have to worry about circadian rhythms in regard about if they're getting their REM sleep, but that's a big joke. But yeah, so it's like there are some corals that normally don't even extend during the day on a wild reef, but in a tank they will, because in the wild the particular predators are out during the day, but they can, and that's probably has there's probably more of the prey also that they want to eat that's out during those daylight hours. So it's like kind of like a twofold. It's also be an interesting thing to see exactly who they're catching and stuff. I don't think there's been too many studies exactly, but we just know that there's, day night versus, predator differences, and that does affect when corals will want to put out their polyps of a specific species.
Fair enough. David was asking, do you ever use the phrase here today, Goni tomorrow?
Oh my God, can I use that? Oh man, my dad would love that too. I'm right. I'm actually taking the screenshot.
Oh, Dave just his head's just got massive.
Yeah, if I'll give you
here today, Goni tomorrow.
I'll pay you 5 cents every time I say it.
Yeah, well done.
I love that.
Fair enough.
Amen.
All right, okay. All right. So we've talked about who is Justin Credabel other than the wrestler for a minute. So can we just go straight through this order here? And again, people in the comments, you're watching at home, get involved. It is interactive. If you've got any questions for Justin about Gonis, please fire them in. So Goni health. So I'll put this on here. So how do you measure Goni health? And if you, let's say you've got an existing Goni, how do you measure its health? What you're looking for, and if you haven't got Goni and you're going out to potentially purchase one or buy one, what sort of things should you be looking for from a fish store?
Well, if it's not dying, it's doing good. But seriously,
okay.
All right. Let's start backwards on that. So, like, if you don't have them yet, what would be the indication that you might be ready for them? Maybe I will, one irony about Goniopora is that sometimes they do really well in new tanks and then they go downhill, but that has to do with kind of the availability of certain trace elements and major elements, but especially potassium, stuff like that. But the other part is like, are you doing good with other hard coral? Do you have a decent coralline algae growing? Are you just having mats of cyanobacteria and stuff? Are you set up for them? So it's just like, if you're doing good with the hard species, and you feel confident, then you can, if you're doing good with other things like that, that means you have like your baseline about what they want, and then you can kind of start there.
Okay. So are you now? Sorry to put it. So you're now saying that they're not really a beginner coral, then? Clearly, from what you're saying.
Most of them, they're not really. Some of them do well in beginner tanks, like a Norfolkensis or a Planiolata, but then there's something that happens at that 6 to 9 month mark, and it happens for two reasons. And the reason that a beginner aquarium, even especially, is like really good because you started with all great new salt. So what happens is like this trace element replenishing cycle. So, there's different ways they can get in their food additives or water changes. And then there's different things that can affect. So what I like to do when I'm like coaching a customer, like on a reef tank, and especially when they're newbies, is that, obviously get these fundamentals down. What, salinity. Most people going from fresh to salt are like, ooh. And nowadays it's great that a lot of people can just pick up salt and do it. Secondarily, nitrogen phosphorus control, making sure people aren't just putting tap water in their tanks. Plus the way they're, how they have their tank set up, and that they have either biological or whatever processes to deal to keep a proper nitrogen phosphorus ratio. Then calcium alkalinity, they need to get a hold of that. So like the first product I ever put in anyone's hands is like either like a 2-part, or if it's a larger tank, getting them set up with calc, if that's enough, if they have enough of a replenishes factor with that. But generally we know in some of these tanks, you can't get it all done with calc. But either way, just like getting them up, if they're a newbie, a beginner, just at reefs in general, is to get themselves comfortable with that. And then like clockwork, month 5 or 6, even like their softies aren't growing as much, and then the Gonis start retracting, and then it always comes down to the potassium and iron and manganese. And
okay, I have. Yeah, they are on the list because they are clearly 3 trace elements that are talked about quite often and associated with this coral. But I think for me that there are Gonis that ignore the sort of fashion and the fancy names that I mentioned a minute ago. There are Gonis that you can pick up fairly cheap, especially in the UK. And I think people gravitate when they've got a new tank, that they want the wavy corals, the corals that move in the tank. And Gonis obviously tick those boxes. And I think people sort of, like I keep saying, gravitate to those corals because of the price, and they move, they're colourful.
Well, and that, I think this goes back to like a fundamental thing about like the market, and then why the Goniopora that were originally available to us were available to us. It goes back to the CITES II treaty, and the fact that also bone implant and the dental industry actually utilized them quite a bit until Indonesia redid all their CITES, and kind of they didn't realize they had to re-up every year, and everyone was left.
Sorry, just rewind. The bone and what? Sorry. Then
So
just read them out.
Goniopora are the best for like bone implants as a natural source.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, their pore structure and everything, and even the makeup of the skeleton is just like spot on for being used and absorbed into human body.
So you could technically have glitter dentures.
Oh yeah, definitely, but very expensive, I bet.
Oh yeah. Well, we're still working on the getting stung by your teeth, but that'll come.
Wow.
But
Okay.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
bone pack,
Okay.
powderized skeleton, stuff like that. But the main species that we used to always get in was Goniopora stokesii. And then I don't know how it is right now in England, what the trade is, but like back in the day, those 20 coral in a box was almost always stokesii. They pretty much always died. I've been able to grow a few. They are one of the hardest species ever. Period, nonstop. And then let alone with like most of these are the free living, kind of like they're just in mud, and that's like another tip of. If you're buying it, see, this is why I'm an advocate of like a named coral. If it's an actual line of captive grown coral, it is worth the money, in my opinion, because it's proven it's been growing out. It's probably a species and a variety of that species that grows well because somebody's growing it. These stokesii, I mean, you can buy them for $5, wholesale back in the. I don't know what it is in today's money because it's been a bit, but yeah, those things are just really tough. They're really hard to grow. They come from the mouth of a muddy river, like most of the ones that, at least when I was in the industry, up until the 2010s, like that's where most of those individual guys came from. They started expanding out a little bit, started getting, as Gonis were more capped. I did have an existential crisis, thinking about like, well, if I publish stuff about growing Gonis, are more people going to grow them and kill them? But what's been exciting is that people have been reaching out, looking at other ones to collect. When Australia opened, they had all kinds of other Gonis, and then this goes to like environment of the Goniopora. Like some Goniopora are designed for certain types of environments. Some live in the mud, different, flow dynamics. Some are high light, high flow. Some are medium. Some are a little bit like they can adapt. Like there are like Goniopora tenuidense, which is the blue purple that we're most used to. Most of the ones we're also coming into the hobby are from kind of really hard places. Like, and some of them are also had the free living bottom, but they came and those came from atolls with very, very low water flow and stuff.
Just
it makes
time
it easy
out.
to collect.
Time out. How many different coral? How many? You blow my mind here. It doesn't say it much. Clearly, people are going to be commenting. How many different Goniopora genus species are there then? Because I'm sorry to sound like ignorant here. I just thought Goniopora was Goniopora.
Yeah, they're kind of over 20. I mean, there's opinions too, and the Polypharmus Djibouti complex. Have you guys ever read the front and back chapters of the Corals of the World book by Charlie Veron, Jen Veron?
No, I haven't. No,
the chapter that includes the reticulate evolution is terrific. But it shows you that, like, kind of like the way I think about Goniopora is kind of like general groupings. And then within those groupings, they have abilities depending on where they settle. And that brings up the question of like epigenetics, stuff like that. But there are corals that prefer certain locations and they'll choose within, and then to get into local populations. But they're as diverse as pretty much like all hard coral, except for the fact that we haven't found any zooxanthellae species. I'll call back to that previous question. So yeah, they are like extremely dynamic as far as like even within the genus about what they prefer. And they even Bernardopora used to be Goniopora stewsbury. Sad to see it go, but it is kind of different. And that was always just and that was the whole thing, was like, oh, red ones live, green ones don't. But it kind of applies because the red ones were generally just different species, also collected in certain areas. So that was kind of the thing. There are green, like the Goniopora norfolkensis, which is by far and away one of my favorite as far as a green version of it. And then they have a different variations and stuff, but you could confuse it for Stokesii, which is that basic one that you would get that just grows like a ball that nobody can keep. Norfolkensis is anyone can keep it almost, like so it's so this is where like I'm an advocate of like named corals, and especially if it's a proven line that grows.
So is it true that the Goniopora generally like dirty water, because that's what many people are thinking?
See, that's a kind of sloppy way to think about it. Dirty water, joke in there, but no, yeah, it's just like you still have to have like hard coral level to keep aliveness. Like coralline. Like if you can't keep a bubble coral, you're probably gonna have a hard time keeping a Goniopora. They're still a hard coral. They have fundamentally basic needs. They just, some of them want more meat than others, than other coral, and they require, because some of them, they have these pretty diffuse skeletons, so that brings in this whole like skeleton health thing, and where people can go wrong with long-term care, problems with imported ones, and how to mitigate that. But because they go so well in human bodies, that's also the same reason for some of these finickinesses. Because once you start introducing the wrong ions in the skeletal matrix, things can go haywire. There's just some that are pretty like, rock solid. That was a joke. Ragonite, I don't know, but I think something about, because they can get pretty diffuse, especially when they're getting more mature, that things can go awry pretty easily there. Also, they do need their nutrition. Some of these other coral can get it in other ways, so it's it's that balance. But they don't. Dirty water, i.e., for me, dirty water means high nitrate, high phosphate, and I'm pretty sure hard coral doesn't like that, unless it's a ratio and it's been growing there for a long time. And
what about in terms of organics then? How do they deal with organics?
Well, it depends on the organic. But yeah, and the balance, the organics balance out with other things, is particularly potassium. Potassium is everyone. I always thought I would just like talk about it for a couple of years, and then thank you again, Steve Garrett, as always, that clued me in on it. He's a House of Acropolis out in California, but I was working for an outfit out there. We're trying to like ramp up a farm. It's like our source water, blah blah blah. So basically, it's like our source water was coming in at like 250, 300 ppm of potassium, because we're taking it off between Catalina and LA, which is northerly waters. There's totally different ion concentrations. That's why if you're pulling water from the ocean, up in the North Atlantic, you'll have to add tons of magnesium, calcium, and alkalinity. There's only a certain amount of capacity that the water can hold ions. So either way, just like he's like, yeah, funny story. I had my system and thought I had a bad potassium test kit. So
is this the 12? Is this the 1200?
This is the 1200.
Can we just pause that? I want to talk about this because it's really interesting. We're going to go to potassium and manganese in a minute, but before we do, can I just summarize on Goni health for me? Can I just suck your brain a little bit more for people watching at home? So going back to somebody's got a new tank, because you were just talking there about looking for certain things in terms of
alkalinity.
Okay.
Calcium.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Potassium.
Yeah.
Also, the other two on the top should be nitrogen, phosphorus, because for newbies, those are always the harder ones.
So can it be a newbie coral?
I think so. The right ones can, and that's what I kind of found interesting, is that, as an ethical, dealer, DEA, don't watch this, but that's an American joke, that, every once in a while I was like, the person really wants to do it. And then I found over time that some of these people did really well with like these norfolkensis, Steuchberia, which have not Goniopora, Planulata. But it was always this that's kind of how I figured out that lock-in of like where people's elements are starting to get weird, and it's across the board. Xenia, zoanthids, that 6-month mark, is where everyone was having trouble, and then you start testing the water. This is ICP was just starting, and if you didn't have that, you had hawk tests that you could possibly like throw that through, and you're like, oh, that's funny, it all got sucked up. So it's just that's why I came to the principle of the photosynthetic 2-part.
So if somebody goes to their LFS then, Justin, and they want to buy a Goni or a Goni frag, let's just say Goni frag, which most people do, again due to pricing, and there's six frags in front of them. What should they be looking for? How do they choose? Going back to my question about health, which one?
Well, yeah, and then polyp extension is especially during the day. It's kind of number one. Yeah. That's and that's when everything's starting to go bad. Like if it's not putting its polyps out during the day. So and that is a number one kind of, oh shoot, my Goniopora is not expanding. And then it's like, all right, because I've had the pleasure of help many people out over the years, and it's just I always liked a good save the lost dog story. But yeah, that's kind of like the one thing. Always look at the edge, the border. Ideally have something that's encrusted over on the plug or whatever the thing is on. The fresher the frag, it's just like the fact that if you could see encrusting growth, that indicates number one, that's the other huge indicator of health. If you can see under the polyps, and then also, you get it picked up. If you have a person, a dealer, so to speak, retailer, wholesaler, but if you pick the coral up and it pulls its polyps in, then you should see like healthy margins, unless you are knowingly buying a fresh frag but I would, if you're a newbie, I would not buy a fresh frag first, because if you don't have your tank on handle, like, do you have like a full mature microbiome and little bugs in your tank and stuff like that? But, those are kind of like the two big things there. Like it should have the polyps in, and then the secondary choosing is like, how much is it encrusting? Also, like, do you know what species it is? No,
that's hard.
Yeah, you can just do a couple tricks to like take it within like one of these main categories, and then also if it's a known frag, if it has a name, somebody should be trying to figure out the species, and or at the very least, if somebody is growing it, how are they growing it? What's the light? What's the flow?
Well,
what are your parameters?
Funny you should say that. So you've bought this frag, as you've just said. You've identified it. You've looked for a healthy one. You've bought a healthy one. Where should you be putting it in the tank? What's the placement then?
Well, again, that goes back to what we were just talking. So it was generally I shoot from middle of the road all the time.
Okay.
I still like, to me, Goniopora are an SPS. So they're
really?
So you treat them like SPS.
Yeah, and then think about Acropora. So you got your deep water Acropora. So, if it's just a frag and you can kind of move it around, if it's really happy when you first place it in a place, that's great. Always shoot for the middle. At least even in light and stuff, some people move their acro frags up, but like, and again, like as much research or like, if you're talking, say you're got a good shop over there, wherever you are in the world, and you got your retailer, and you can get the information from them. But like generally, most Gonis are like medium to medium high flow. There's a couple that kind of do okay in lower flow, but they don't need it. A couple kind of want it.
What about placement in a tank then, in terms of height then as well?
It depends what's your light. What are your pumps?
Okay.
Talk to me. Okay. Yeah, so but I like to do like the measurement of I'm American, so it's still imperial, but I'm working at most. So there's a lot of like metric conversion I'm learning.
But
So
most people will put Gonis on the bottom. Like,
yeah, I just no that most Gonis, all else being equal, should be put on your hardscape. You know, unless
Huh.
your dam bed is awesome, or if you put it on your hardscape and it's not looking happy, just move it around a couple days. Also, you're putting it next to the thing it should be put next to.
yeah,
What's
okay.
your upflow and downflow too? Who are its neighbors?
Hmm.
I generally find
Well, I was gonna ask you about
that.
neighbors.
Like, wasn't that part of our initial? Yeah, so you have Goni neighbors, but then you have, you know, outside of Goni neighbors, and then I noticed that there's, you know, most Fabi, they really get along. You know, if you have it right down for, yeah, they're kind of like, you know, and it's like, again, generalized blanket statement there, you know, so just don't wantonly do wild stuff, but also like, you know, Favites always have a heavier sting. So that's why I have like, you know, my principle of, you know, with these big farms is my Favia Favites Platygyra. Favites first in the flow, then Favites, then Platygyra. If you do it opposite, everything's done. So that same principle applies, you know, to Gonis, and then you know, big deal. And it's one of my avenues of research we're looking at is that, you know, we call it a seating chart, but basically it's like who should be where. So, or who should be where? Oh my gosh, they came up with that. But who should be where in the order of like where the flow is going, and because we all know. Galaxia. Oh, who does Galaxia?
Oh my God.
Yeah, so like that will just, and we know that Galaxia wakes up at night, stings, you know, 10 feet away.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these different coral that like to get along with each other. I'll have to remember that was some obscure coral that kills Galaxia all the time. Duncans kill Galaxia.
People like to come again. It might be a UK thing. Don't know about the States. Apologies, but people like to collect certain types of coral and create, as I've just put in here, Goni gardens or
yes. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. You know,
as I've just said there, nasty neighbours. You were talking there a little bit, you know, about Platygyra and Favia and etc. So, where do we stand with Gonis? So, I mean, I've had Chris on here, Chris Meckley on here before that's gone. My amaze balls, you know, will not get on with other Goniopora. Is that true? Is it just a bit of a myth? Is it depend on the system?
Well, yeah, I think this gets into like some of them don't like each other and others do.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a little bit of semi cheat sheet, which is basically polyp size.
Oh,
so generally the smaller.
They're having a polyp off then, yeah.
Yeah, but like even the smaller ones just seem to be able to, you know, punch above their weight. Okay. You know, part of that was, you know, obviously Stoochberry eye. However, a lot of the ones that are still in the proper thing, like our Burgosei, man, that's a good one. So actually, this picture this is a Norfolkensis in a Burgosei. Now, this is. Thing is, the Burgosei will beat the crap out of the Norfolkensis.
You sent me some pictures. I have got them in the background. Do you want me to throw them up? Are these one of the ones?
Yeah, might as well. You know, it's just like I gotta, you know, get a little Norfolkensis. This is again. So I like to group these corals into like kind of groups, but then there's things that we know like you know. You guys should not be able to have this in the UK, or somebody who's breaking a law. But the ORA, was it what do they call it? Red Planet. But it's a Goniopora planulata. It's like red, kind of like a dirty red, but like it grows like the Dickens.
Yeah, the ORA red Goni, right?
Yeah, bulletproof. Okay. See, that one I would just send home with almost anyone as long as they kind of have basic grasp of things.
That's the big one sitting there.
I'm not telling anybody. Well, I don't know, just like what the CITES rules are. Where are you? Where are you, Dong?
Boston. Massachusetts.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, all right.
We're gonna get in trouble.
We're, America and Afghanistan are as a few years ago, are the only two countries that did not have a CITES export permit for hard coral. So chew on that. Anyways, and then you have like one of the first corals that actually was like successful with is Goniopora polyformis, which is like a tan, poop brown, ugly coral. But it was the one that I could grow. It looked completely different.
Oh no, it's your wedding photo. I had to ask. Did you get any inspiration from Goniopora for the pink suit?
I like pink. Wait, do you see the one with the alien?
Shoes?
Is that up there?
The shoes are just dope.
Those are really comfortable. I have a blue pair too for dancing.
Yeah, congratulations. Anyway, it was just entertaining. The
Goniopora burgosei. This is we call this fairy feathers.
Okay.
So this is it's either Eclipsensis or a polyformis within that group. And this thing did like super terrific. I don't know if it's still like circulating out there. I mean, this thing can grow from a single polyp. This thing grew it was just an absolute performer. Totally ugly tan brown, but I wouldn't whisper it, but if somebody else whispered to it, it would just grow. It was just such a great one.
Like your lips.
That's a good one. That's the only thing I'm allergic to is lisinopril. So when you get over 40, I am that old. Sometimes white males have to take blood pressure medication. Other than that, and then all right. So this one's a really cool example. I think you've been kissing the Goni, Justin. I think that's what happened. Don't tell anybody.
Sure, sorry, mate.
Don't tell anybody. Sorry. So people should be, I do have a couple tips, but all right. So this coral right here is very interesting. So this is actually a Goniopora tunudens from a reef, from a hard substrate, high energy reef.
Huh?
Yeah, and it's most of the ones we see have the kind of clubbed or triangular tentacles. And so this one's exhibiting very few collectors collect them from active hard substrate reef. And then I had found out where this was collected from, but yeah, this one's fascinating. So it also shows you, because when you think about tunudens, I mean, actually, even within tunudens, let's bring it back to Gonioporas getting along. Even inside the species, you had the same morph, the same kind of physiological morph, the same growth form. The blues always beat the blues beat the purples up, or the purples beat the blues up, always.
Wow.
Yeah, it was without a doubt. So even within an individual coral species, or even within a regional species complex, a different varietal would be technically more dominant over the other. So that's a whole other thing. So it's just you kind of have to a little bit play it out. But if you put the blues and purples too close, eventually they might start fighting. And then
so how powerful is the sting that Goniopora packs?
Okay, well, I have an interesting story. I've never been stung but once, and it was horrible. But it was a planulata from Australia, and I had fragged it. And normally, safety SOPs would, wear blah blah blah. Either way, I wasn't really thinking about it. The thing stung me like a galaxia. I'd never come across it since. But it was also planulata. But that individual coral, it was wild collected, pretty big chunk, but it had power behind it. But here you can see this. So this is pretty fascinating here. So on the right side of your screen, you got 3 different types of Norfolkensis. On the back side, you can see some fairy feather there. That little kind of bluish guy is the reef collected tunudens. The red guys are Somaliensis, which are also, I don't know if they're not traded enough. They're not the easiest. They're not the hardest. But you can kind of see, like, even here, I'm not putting them too much together. And I think this also goes to like where these Bombi gardens, you know, what's the purpose of it? I have to say that them coming out of the Indonesia, like the last 10 years, they really upped their game. And they're getting more things that can kind of live okay together. But I mean, the Goniopora want to be the size of, you know, at least a small car at some point, ideally, inside their heart. So eventually there's going to be some kind of fighting. But here you can kind of see where I have some interactions and overlaps between them. And then I think this does bring up another principle about like even how to put Goniopora next to each other, which is like only have like tentacles overlap and give plenty of room for like the base tissue. Because I've seen the base tissue super expand and then to fight. And then one of the first papers and one of the first compounds, a terpene ever discovered, is actually called Gonioporine. And it's one of the first compounds that is allelopathy. Oh, look at the cat.
The Goniopora toxin?
Yeah, the Goniopora
Yeah.
toxin. And so then they just throw it out in chunks. And then there's all kinds of different versions of that. So, and then they also are probably doing that to each other. But then you can start to see the different ones. Like I've noticed that they're just doing it, you know, every once in a while I get to a shop and I can kind of see what's coming out, you know, from the different distributors and whatnot. But that's the other thing. I mean, these things are pretty profound in and of themselves, you know. So I guess that's the other thing. Is Goniopora going to live in my tank? What else is in your tank? Are you running carbon? Blah, blah, blah. These are, you know, like how we think about softies and stuff like that. You know,
should somebody be able to shoot for a garden then? Like I said a second ago, a Goni garden. Is it achievable, do you think?
Well, it depends on how big it is. Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, what are we doing underwater with these gardens of all these coral? You know, let's follow all the basic coral rules for everything else, which is keep them happy, proper flow. If you see them fighting, deal with it. Learn from others.
Sorry to explain. When you see them fighting,
so that will, like with this, you'll start to see with, like, say you got two Gonis next to each other. You're going to see one Goni having retracted polyps, back to this retracted polyp thing. You know, if the rest of the colony's fine, but it's only this one part, probably they're not getting along. Also, you may notice, and then this goes upflow, downflow. Also, nowadays we have these pumps that can do differential and pulsing waves and program stuff. So you have to like put that in your mind too. Is like, where is most of the contact or aggression happening there? But again, let's bring it back to like torch coral. You know, euphyllian stuff. You know, I mean, torch corals always got beat up by frog spawns and hammers and stuff. And then I don't know whoever came up with the idea that they're kind of different, but like that was also a really big indication that they're pretty different. Because they would always get beat up by them. But it's also like you gotta like where is everyone going, and then what are the modes of fighting? So far, I haven't really seen like Goniopora have like explosive mesenterial filaments as a assault option. You know, you see that with you'll see it with Favids, others, chalices.
I've experienced in this tank behind me mushrooms taking on the Goni and absolutely annihilated the Goni. I've had to move the mushroom.
No, and that, I mean, mushrooms are packing a punch, man. And then, have you seen the mesenterial films come out?
No, I've just noticed that.
They're just probably edging up on it. Yeah, I'm just putting from my brain computer about interactions. But dude, and then mushrooms they have so much stuff. And then there's like, I was, you know, a huge debate 18 years ago. Can you even keep soft corals and hard coral together? And then, you can if you filter the tank enough and put the right guys together and the flow's right. But yeah, so that's like a, you know, this portends back to that initial question. How do you tell what's a healthy Goni? Well, it's out. It's growing, you know, like the basics. you know.
Yeah.
But like that's one of the telltale signs, whether even just like, you know, a first person, for, you know, like a newbie growing it, or even like your experience and it's your first Goniopora, and you put it in your tank and it's completely shrunken up. It's kind of not normal for them. They're supposed to have their polyps out during the day, you know, and but then secondarily you can kind of do a decision matrix about like who gets the longest stuff. And then what we found is just generally in similar groups, they can get along, get closer together. You still always have a hierarchy. Sometimes there's almost not a hierarchy within a certain species or something with like almost any coral. Other coral are just like fucking clean lines, part of my French. But like Paredes Roost is one of that big one with the purple and the yellow. And that's a paper I always like to refer to, and that's like an old school one. But like it was just like clear, same species, the different color varietals, one always wins. And that happens with Tenuitans, and I forget which one. If it's the blue or purple with the atoll collected Indonesian Tenuitans. But it always
his question there about the blue and purple, it's come up a few times in the comments. Is that blue and purple theory work for Goni or other corals?
I don't. That would be an interesting theory. I don't necessarily see why. I think it's more of just the one thing, the fact that it's that color. Because both the blue and the purple are technically a chromatoprotein, which is even a fluorescent protein. So it doesn't the slight variance on the inside of the barrel shape of the amino acids of that chromoprotein shouldn't in itself the color is just an easy way. Although, hey, we can comb through the literature and look at it. I mean, we do have that technically purple Paredes Roost and the yellow, but we got two examples there, so I can't say scientifically. But also, I don't know if the papers are out there because I have not read them. If they are,
so if people are collecting the Gonis then because they want to make a mushroom, they want to make a Goni garden, so in their reef tank, and what you're saying is naturally look at any coral warfare, look at how this stinging or the fighting with each other. Anything else that people should look out for? Should they space them, give them enough space?
That's exactly what I was about to say. And I would recommend have enough forethought about how you want to space them. But again, we are dealing with really tiny glass boxes. So you have I think it's okay to kind of put them closer together, but be ready to move them later. Because that's probably safer for them initially. The principle of undefended substrate. So with the coral, if you're creating a garden and you want to get them grown out, maybe have to move them out. But if you're placing them so that they're going to grow together in 2 or 3 years, what's happening in between there on your live rock and everything? It's kind of undefended substrate. Might as well just have a plan, have the corals closer together. They're liking each other. Great. As they get bigger, if you see fussing between them, start to separate them. But if you just left all that open space between them for other things to get in there, like deuces, algae, weird water flow, it's undefended substrate. If the Gonis have all their polyps out, they're all doing work to clean up their area. I think that's the way to go. And then just kind of as best you can, reef aquariums are, and everyone's learning as we're going along. But I do advocate for having them kind of closer together and just move them apart. There's people who are long-term gardeners in New England. They get all fussy. If you plant a garden that looks good straight at first with perennials, and then, you don't have a plant. I'm way into planting perennials close to each other and then starting to move the clusters apart as the garden matures over a decade, because the in-between is just a lot of weeding.
Okay.
Does Goniopora actually put the toxin into the water column?
Yeah, it just emits it. Just like a sarcophyton.
Yeah. So because
What
the
part
one
of it?
time that there's a guy actually brought over a Goni, so he's in a transition state. Okay, so he want me to house his Goni. So he brought in his Goni. When I put the Goni in my tank, the whole system, the next day, all my other Goni all retracted. With only the guy, new one was open and nice and happy, but there's in a different tank. All these tanks are plumbed together, share the same water. But then every Goni in my whole system all retracted after that guy gets in.
So there's an indication on the structure of that terpene, and then just even what we could surmise on an individual one. But yeah, it is like especially initially designed for neighbors closely related, including Goni.
Yeah. So after then I called that guy and said, hey, you got to take this out. You got to take it back. So after that one left, everybody back to normal.
Fascinating. That's really fascinating.
And that Goni actually is a wild Goni that he bought it from a fish store.
What color was it?
It happened to be blue and green. It just happened to be. Yeah. Then my ORA is a red Goni. I don't know. But then the thing is that the Goniopora close up, two different type close up, and my ORA red Goni close up. And then there is a green Goni there, which is aquaculture. Don't know what species it is. It's been a while. Everybody close up.
See, that's I mean, like the Goni, and then like when we think about the terpenes, we gotta like that was the one specific one, but we know that like pretty much every coral has like dozens or hundreds of individual terpenes that it will pump out as protection or this and that. The marijuana industry in America is fascinating because they developed all these tools to actually look into the cannabis plant. And then they even start listing out, it's just gobs and gobs of terpenes. And these are functional organic molecules designed to mostly to
suppress.
do things, other things. Yeah. That's why we have herbs in general.
Yeah,
that's
don't smoke Goniopora. Anyway.
I have not done any studies on that, but I probably won't work. I know there's this one leather coral that's really good for back pain, but
okay.
I don't know where.
Just a question for you here from Stephen. Are Gonis susceptible to bacterial infections? What's the best treatment?
If it's dying, it is. And then the best treatment is to have it not die or get sick. But yeah, honestly, all right, so this brings up, so what I most notice.
Okay.
And then I really did notice, this is mostly like bringing it back to this like diffuse skeleton conversation. Is the fact that a lot of coral in general, and then especially Goniopora, are prone to this, which is like kind of, and we'll just bring it back to like wild caught here. Let's just assume wild caught for this. That they have a whole ecosystem, microbiome and macrobiome inside their skeleton, and then if we're talking like these Stokesy eyes, man, they were coming in big. I don't know how big they're coming in right now, but they were coming in big. And then we could talk about budding later on this, but most of them will be failed. Like you get smell a coral that's going to live when it comes out of the bag. And then it was like, all right, how do we treat this? There's at that point I already had hydrogen peroxide as a tool, but like. So the bacterial infection is kind of like, that's a very complex subject. It would take 4 hours to talk about because generally that's just like an end stage of everything else going wrong. There's no quite quick fix, but all else being equal, follow the rules for hydroperoxide dipping depending on whatever ailment. But if there's other like fundamental problem, that alone won't fix it. Bacteria dying and lesions on coral is basically an end point of everything else going wrong.
So what is your protocol to use hydrogen peroxide as a dip?
I do have that. So
sorry, see, I've got it. ready for you.
Yeah, it's and then I have so I made sure to like get everything online, and you can so I have like the basic Pacific Indo chart, but it's pulled off of one of my slides. It's on the internet. You can kind of probably, if you just chat GPT it or whatever, but that's kind of the safe low key, and it kind of like separates everything into Pacific into kind of like the thought process with this chart, which is basically like what's within a reason of potential dipping for all problems, and then keeping it within a threshold that you're not going to kill the coral.
So you have a chart that can download?
Yeah, it's online somewhere. And then Goniopora. And then, I mean, we could talk about the peroxide dosing and dipping, and then, but it has different things. And then, so I would do, and this is the delicacy about like hydroperoxide dipping. It's like, what is the water you're dipping it in? What's your water chemistry? Because that's seriously going to affect within a mean of like 50% of how long you can keep that coral in that dip. But it's online, like my certain best right now estimation. I do like to give better guidance. It also does, so this can save a coral. Like say your Goni is experiencing tissue polyp recession. It has exposed skeleton. You already have a big problem on your hands that you're going to have to get everything else figured out about. There you go. Great. Yeah. See, I love the reef community because I've been relying on this as a platform.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa. There you go.
Yes.
That's the link.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have this file here right now, and then I'm doing all kinds of new charts right now, so I don't have it for long.
Yeah, that's a good question because you mentioned a hydrogen peroxide dosing.
Yeah.
Yes. So I am now at the point where hydroperoxide dosing, regularly good idea for long-term success. It does depend on your aquarium and all the other parts of it, so it needs to be considered. And then, what kind of hydroperoxide are you doing? What part of the world are you on? What is your supply? What can you get? It's not a cheat. Like you have to have everything else, but it's also a tool. Like it's a tool, and it works really well. Also, this might help you with your Goniopora and fighting among all other coral. So this brings up like, all right, so dosing. I have my basic dosing algorithm is basically 1 mil per 10 gallons of 3%. You should use food safe. And then you do that for a week, and then you go up 1 mil. Some people get up to like 1 mil per gallon per day, but the huge caveat is that you have to adjust, and you can't just like let it go, because a lot of aquariums. So this was always like a fundamental problem too, bringing up Goniopora with I am pro Goniopora bombing. I think the number one thing is just like underfitted substrate, what's going to be in there, blah blah blah. Brings up the question of like, oh my gosh, I got this one patch of hair algae or cyanobacteria, this one little crook in the rock, and it never goes away. And my phosphates and nitrates are 0, and they probably also are 0, but like that one spot won't go away. But yeah, we won't talk about that right now. But yes, but yeah, 0 being under 5 and under 5 for both of them. But you can't get rid of it unless you literally oxidize out that particular spot.
In it on it.
Yeah, so this is like the guidelines too, are like you kind of have like your how many mils per day you can put in, and then the way I designed my recommendation is that you could technically put this mils per day in all at once. So and people do really well I like it best too when you can have like, you know, if your system is at a point where you can just have it on doser or it's a regular, you know, dosing nonstop, but you just follow that per day. And then, you know, if you really want to start getting into like very particulars, but then I would need your whole chemical profile.
So, sorry to keep putting in here, time out a minute. Why would somebody want to dose hydrogen peroxide into their reef tank?
Basically, I like to call it liquid ozone, but less worse.
Okay, so we're going back. So we're talking about the warfare, the toxins. Sorry, that you were talking about. Right. Okay.
So yeah, and then this is, you know, so
if you've got one Goniopora, or if you've got a garden, or if you've got a lot, if you've got a big tank, there's a lot of variables there, Justin, isn't there? So.
Well, all right. So this is where it brings into how's your tank doing? How's everyone doing?
Yeah.
Bioassay. Do you know all your animals? How are they doing? Even
is it a mixed reef? Is it a
exactly? Yeah, and it's like, all right, you gotta prioritize any change to your most sensitive animal. Will be your indicator animal, and then lower it down. There's either you can dose it, you can ramp up or back off based on how your indicator animals are doing.
So the indicator animal I use when I try hydrogen peroxide dosing is actually one of the Jason Fox jack-o'-lantern
Leptoceras.
Lepto. Because
and what do you look for
the thing get pale.
Do you look for paling?
Yeah. So basically we retract its polyp, so it looks white, but it's not like bleaching. No, it's not. So when it's irritated, and then the polyp will retract, even the tiny microscopic polyp. So the coral will turn from gold color into pale yellow.
And then do you have zoantha's system?
Not at this one, but I have zoanthus on the other system. When I try hydrogen peroxide, the zoanthus doesn't budge. There's no difference.
Oh, that's
it doesn't
interesting.
respond much.
Yeah, because like zoanthas are generally like the first indicator as far as like kind of reaching about 50 ppm, maybe 75 ppm of the hydrogen peroxide in solution, and then you know it's that's also does indicate that like, I mean, if it's reacting like that, honestly, I don't have a reaction index for Leptastria because I just didn't ever have enough of it in my systems that I was growing, but that could be I would love to, you know. So what I've noticed is that, you know, it's very sloppy, but the first coral that reacts with polyp retraction to a Goniopora dose is the least sensitive. But that's still sloppy. You can't but I would always, you know, once you just get to a part, zoanthids are on the top of the list of like how much they can take overall. But they're the first to close up, you know. So that was like when
I dose very small amount, like less than 1 ml per 10 gallon, less than that. So probably,
and this is kind of a big deal too, which is like the source. Like definitely, you know, now things seem to be changing in the last 5 years with like availability of different types of hydrogen peroxide, stuff like that. I have a very strong caveat that everyone needs to be very careful about 12% peroxide. And then you just need to consider like full bodyguard with 50%, let alone blowing up a house. But like you could literally lose your eyeball in a second, you know, if you have a bad splash. So like my lab protocols are very like specific about that. Once you take it down from 12 to Good man. I'm gonna send.
Do you know why I use this?
But do you need to be using this? Because I'm just conscious because Dong's got shares in Amazon and everything Dong shows, people go out and buy. After
I am paid by Jeff.
I already had this. Do you? So I have a question. Do you need to use hydrogen peroxide if you've got Gonis? Should you need it?
No. It's just like it depends on what tool you have. You know, some people have a skimmer, some people have carbon, some people, you know, it's a whole tool matrix. Somewhat, what are the it's all about,
What about water changes? What about water changes?
See, that's the other part where everything is in equations too.
Okay.
I think the genius of like a lot of Bob Stark's products is that like he's if we got to download his brain into the world computer, which is happening now. But like
Bob Stark is the founder of ESV.
Yeah, and it's like
ESV
he just really has such a good understanding. And then like with the Bionic, I think why it was so successful too. Like not only are you doing alkalinity and everything, but we were nudging up potassium. We're nudging up all these, down here in the Keys. I am using there's depending on the site, there's different ways that we do with it. But even depending on the site, we have to have different augmentation to the chemicals. So like try to like see what's happening, what's coming in. Like everyone should kind of like it's just a tool. Like I mean, if you got a 10-gallon tank and a 100-gallon dark filter bioactive unit, it's all about what gets uptake, what gets taken out.
In the ocean, that when you're down to the down in the forest, what is the potassium level in the ocean anyway?
So
because that you're the potassium man.
This is very
About 420. Is it not 420, 400? That's the same with calcium, is it not?
It's thank you, good sir. Yes, yeah, and that's isn't that interesting? Like, shouldn't that be important? Like, that's this. Calcium right now just beats it, but like it's still like, was it bad testing and stuff like that? But we know the oceans are changing and the oceans are getting a little bit lower in potassium, but generally it's about 400, 420. It should be, right? Just that fucking bare minimum.
I'll let you tell your story now with the 1200 test kit. I know you're dying to do it, Justin. Come on.
Okay, well, yeah, it's like, and let's start this with like, all right, well, why is your Goni dying or anything else too? And let's start with the sixth most abundant element in the ocean, which is potassium. And then I still have did a video with Mark Levinson, and then I don't know if I'm right.
Several times. I've watched it several times.
It was like I generally don't read comments and stuff, but there's one guy who's like, "Oh my god, this guy's a joke," because I said. And I still said it with caveat, but I find calcium chases potassium. So if I start upping my potassium, seems like my calcium's higher. Still with the instruments that I'm using, and I still need to do like hard OAP and MS screens with ICP to completely confirm that, but we'll find out. It could be, but generally, like everyone. Like they're neck and neck, right? Calcium is generally consumed more than potassium, but if potassium is not there, everything dies. So they're kind of a basic. You guys look like you're men of a certain age. See, potassium probably will do you. Well, I gotta eat more. Trying to eat more bananas and stuff, but
Right. So just you quoted. Oh, sorry, I quote. You said. You were running your potassium at that time with Mark Levison's stream at around the 650 to 800 mark. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
100%. And then those systems were, well, it's pretty high, but I was also bringing it back to, the coral healthy or whatever. I was running a coral farm, and we have high throughput. We need to grow a lot of stuff. And then, I always like to say
grow or color though. Sorry, growth or color.
Both at the same time, baby.
Both. Okay. Yeah.
No, it's like both are business, man. So, also
definitely.
And I don't do things flippantly. I take it with what I know based off our observation. But if I'm doing it like 50, 60 hour a week, sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, so I had different And then those systems were, the Redfield ratio was, now we all know scientifically that it was only for that one particular species, but more or less that ratio exists within a mean. So it's a 10-to-1 nitrogen to phosphorus, but phosphate is a tool to measure total available phosphorus. Then, all right, so sure, we have it in America, sure, you have it up there in England, everyone knows the NPK in a bag. Pick a bag of a fertilizer or whatever. K and PK. So the higher your nitrogen and phosphorus. So we even have technically, see, the part of the reason our reefs are dying is that there's too many inputs of nitrogen and phosphorus, especially in certain locations. And then even in some of the source water, we still have to technically higher than what's in water column. So we can nudge it. Also, you can nudge the potassium. But also what happens if you don't? You can't just play the old rules that also play the old rules. Like, all right, well, like some people are not paying attention to potassium, and what I love, the good part about this hobby and industry is that people just have no problem with, technically it could be trade secrets, but it's not. It's just like if you have more people that are growing coral and being successful, everyone's going to be more successful. But this potassium thing is like such a big fulcrum,
Because I've watched that video with Mark Levinson several times, as I said, hence why I knew a lot of what you just talked about. But the word on the street with these guys has always been manganese, not potassium. So I find it's very interesting.
It's just part of one of these fulcrums too. Okay. So, and then
so sorry to keep
water
to put in.
Yeah. So let's bring up these ratios.
Exactly. So that's what I was about to say. So if you're focusing on manganese and you're dosing it manually and you're doing an ICP, but you're not paying attention to the potassium, are you wasting your time?
Oh, I mean, it's the fundamental. Like it's one of these. If it's not there, nothing will live. Okay. So and it's you
not
can
there
do
what? Give me a range. Give us a range. What
generally it's for me 420 is bare minimum for most tanks. But also the higher your phosphorus, nitrogen, which guarantee most people are like 10 to 100 times higher than a natural reef. You need to bring up the other side of this fulcrum. Remember how we learned about calcium alkalinity and how it's like a fulcrum, and then magnesium sits at the seesaw of it? The higher your magnesium, the more calcium. So potassium does a whole bunch of stuff like that, and a little bit more, if you want to think about it like that. And it makes all the other stuff available useful to the coral.
So basically what you're saying is that the potassium is playing the role of magnesium to calcium alkalinity. Then potassium is playing the same role for nitrogen and phosphorus.
Yeah, and there's still not a clean math with that. It's very complicated, but that is what it's doing. You can even have corals in fresher water, but bump up your potassium because it's just going to jam the chlorides and sodium and calcium into the coral to help it with the high stress situation. That is a whole different subject. But yes, that's kind of like, it's not as clean as the magnesium, but yes, it's like, if you don't have that fulcrum, nothing happens. Like you die.
Because that on the invertebrate, like coral and including worms, something like that, they all have the potassium channel on their skin.
I was about to say that. And where do you have potassium channels? In your heart, calcium ion, chloride, sodium channels, all that stuff, right? So that's the basic functioning of your cells. Like corals sit at the part in evolution where one side split to inverts, the other side split through tunicates to vertebrates. We have the same fundamental biological chemistry. Like our cells won't function. You could kill somebody with enough potassium chloride.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
The lethal injection.
Whoa.
If that's the case, can you kill your tank then? So can you overdose it?
Everything can be overdosed. What is every cure is a poison of the right amount, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this is like every once in a while, and it's like I always like to help people out. Potassium chloride, yes. It's kind of what we go for, and then that's just the easiest. And then there's so much potassium chloride as a field, but then kind of figuring out what the best supply. But this is like, it's such an important element that it's just like it's almost at some time, you gotta pay attention to it. Like this is like you could start with calcium alkalinity, then get to nitrogen and phosphate, then get to but you got to really consider this NPK ratio thing. You can't grow corals if you don't have potassium. And then also you can melt everything if you put too much potassium in too fast. You can melt anything by putting anything in too fast.
Okay, so I'm just conscious that people are going to watch this live now or watch it back, and they're going to go, "Oh, I'm going to go and put some potassium in my tank. My pond's going to look great."
Good things happen slow. Bad things happen fast. With reefs,
Yeah.
And a live show with rock and roll.
So somebody's going to want to, because the other thing with potassium is testing for it. A titration test or being able to test for it. So people are going to do an ICP.
I'm kind of curious about the sale of Salifert to this.
Okay.
So hopefully it does hold up. It's still like kind of like
it's going to give you a bit of a range, I suppose, as well. But I mean, it's within.
It's an available test. It tests fast, and it's also within a range. And then it's we don't know if it's going to get sloppier or not. But also, ICPs, also ICPPs, two at a time, or it is potassium is a hard element to test for. In ICP too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then
the Salifert test kit max out as 460.
Yes. Yeah. And then cause they're new one. So I haven't found a workaround about that. Because the old one used to be able to like double out, but they did change it. And then I'm gonna have to like give my informed non-consent about also,
potassium or manganese. Potassium or manganese. Which one should people be looking at first with Gonis?
Potassium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Potassium
is actually some
good
macro
luck finding
element.
a manganese test kit you could use over the counter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then you can, and then it doesn't, and then that's a whole. We'll have to spend like 3 hours just.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just thinking about it.
Potassium. And then I've been out of it for a couple of years, but does Red Sea still selling a potassium kit? It used to be like a 25-minute test and 20 different steps.
The last potassium kit I bought was the KZ one years ago.
Oh wow! All right, so
what I'm using
this goes back to my this also goes back to you can math it out. So I know you're in England and we're in America and we're all imperial, but you could do a basic ppm metric dosing regimen. Also, again, like the recommendations about dosing peroxide, you start at the bare minimum about what's okay. You have you have a ramp up period. You have a runway, and if you bioassaying your coral, are they responding well or not? And then you gotta calm down and take it slow, and then you'll know. Also, that all rhymes. So, copyright.
So, since that potassium chloride also used as a coral dip at a much higher concentration, so I actually looked up to the scientific literature to see what exactly is the concentration can trigger the
it's like 40 ppt. Yeah.
How much?
I think it was 40 ppt. Oh, he lost our boy.
Oh, actually, I think it's around 1400 ppm.
That's probably right. Sorry, I was.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking specific gravity there. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then that's like when we talk about like stress on the coral too. About like what are the dips? What are you dipping for? How long can you dip for? So, but yes, it does work, but you gotta have focused action on what you're dipping it for. And then but it can like cause a lot of stress on the coral because it's kind of ripping things up, but it works on that fundamental thing because what it's doing is exploding very small animals.
So when people take care of the potassium and then they look at the manganese, so that's the sequence, right? So what exactly is manganese do to the Goniopora?
Well, what is manganese? What is iron?
Yeah, what do they actually do to the Goniopora?
I think it's a slight red herring, but it's not.
Okay.
It does make a big difference as long as everything else is in line. And if the coral's humming and jamming along, I know for a fact if I do not dose my iron manganese every morning or midday, I have to change it down here right now based on the time. So this brings up the whole two-part. And then also, what happens once you dose your iron and your manganese into your aquarium? Like, what gets to where? Do you guys dose iodine?
I used to.
Not exactly.
Can I just
too lazy to do that.
Just before you move on, can I just ask you? You mentioned you said something a second ago about potassium, about how important it was. I'm assuming you're blanketing that across everything, not just.
Oh yeah, just basic, basic survival.
So what I'm saying, the reason why I'm asking you is that most people get an ICP result, or they do a titration test, and they will look for, obviously, after salinity, they will be looking at alkalinity, magnesium, calcium, the big three. They may look at certain things like have they got any pollutants. They're going to look at, depending if they've done an MS or an OES.
I look at potassium before
nutrients. This is what I'm saying to you. This is why I'm asking you. So in your expertise, clearly, people should be looking at potassium levels above.
You can't even get potassium into the cell without the. You can't get calcium into the cell without the potassium.
There you go. That's what I'm asking.
We all know that through human biology stuff. Eukaryotic cell, basic biology, but also, like, I just always caution, just don't go, this is gonna work. You can't just
the reason I'm asking you
because you can blow up your tank within a second with potassium chloride if you add too much. Also with hydrogen peroxide, also with like any of the other number of things that you could do.
Because Tom, I think this is something that I think really would be beneficial to people, watching and watch it back. Is I think people don't even myself to an extent. People need to understand which of these trace elements do what and why they're important and why they're more important than others. It's like and I think there's so much that people can learn from this because potassium is something that I guarantee you, majority of people watching this at home, when they say say the word Goniopora, they all just say manganese. Manganese.
Yeah, I mean, manganese works if you have enough potassium and if you have the proper balance of iron. Yeah. And then iron, good luck testing that. So like my protocol, so I'm the juice wizard at work, but that's technically not a moat title. But
you don't use that phrase at home. I take it now.
Me and Sonny have been talking about getting into juicing. We're in Florida, lots of mangoes. But all right. So this is where like you got your like kind of safe zones about like blanket recommendations that you can give, and always warnings. But then it's also all right. So why do we dose manually iron at my work at Moat every day straight into the troughs. And why do we do it at that certain time of day? What happens to iron when you start dosing it to the system? It just starts immediately reacting with all kinds of stuff, chelates almost into oblivion within minutes. So so dosing it at night is useless. Dosing it in the wrong ionic form with the wrong electron balance on useful also mess things up. Manganese, well, what form of manganese? What time is it getting it? These are all there are basics, but there isn't but yeah, also if they don't have that, I think part of it, reflecting on it, trying to figure out these guys, think about the whole polyps, they got these stacks and stacks of rows of zooxanthellae and stuff, and especially it's probably why they got their polyps out during the day. They just, they're trying to do a high throughput metabolism thing here. Also, they're trying to feed the junk out of their zooxanthellae as fast as they can. But it's also, just go ahead, take an ICP sample of your tank, and then send it to them. And then, there's a good possibility, even with the best of your work, that half of it's coated on the side of the bottle aren't available for sample testing. 5 parts per billion. This is one of the tiniest amounts of elements in water. But if you don't have it, nothing lives. So this is about.
You've also talked about. Sorry, again. You talked about acro
No problem.
power. How you dosed acro power in your previous experience.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying that is because of how you've just talked about with dosing iron. And I know there's no similarity in terms of the two substances, but I think there's a little bit of similarity in terms of the application and the purpose.
Yes.
Which is why I brought it up. So,
it was worth every penny at my business to dose acro power.
Because a lot of people, again, will put stuff on a doser, won't they? Naturally, people go, I cannot be bothered to dose this, whatever. I'm going to put it on a doser. It looks cool. And I've done it. I've done these things.
Well, I think everyone has the right to have, approach the hobby and or profession their own way, as long as they're either having fun or doing good.
That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, and it's there's many ways to skin this cat, but are you getting the effect you want? Yeah, and this is and even if I set up a customer's doser for an amino acid, I jam it in big chunks because it will just get eaten up in the water column, and then it's not available.
Can you just explain that again for people? So,
amino acids are very
yeah,
it's just and then. Gotta hand it to Julian because the guy's just always on point. Bob Stark, everyone's these people that are putting out these useful products to people, and but if you're just drip, drip, drip into your tank, it's just all going to get eaten up in the top water column by bacteria or whatever. You want to get enough of a concentration into your tank so that it gets pushed into the coral. The coral wants to receive it, but you know what makes it hard for it to receive it? If you don't have high enough potassium.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Anyways, but yes, so there's.
So you would manually dose. So you would take what somebody would normally dose on a doser, just for argument's sake. Over this.
If you have a control, I wouldn't do a drip doser. I would do just a chunker doser. And then,
it's like bonus message.
Yeah, so you would feed it maybe like Phyto, just pour it in.
Yeah, I also where are you guys at to fight it? Because I don't even do that at all.
I'm just
tell me something that
trying to. I'm just literally trying to say it in a way that people might be able to sort of
so
understand what I'm saying.
It just goes back to what's the tool? How do you use it?
Yeah.
And it's there's so many cool ways to use it too. So far, we also don't have an electric hammer because that's stupid. Sorry, but I could tell you a powered screwdriver is I think that's what you call them over there, is faster for some applications than a hand screwdriver. But also it's like you can't get ahead of your thing. Also, this is, it's a habitual thing with humans. We want to get things done, ideally, but like be like, oh, potassium's good. No, you will literally melt your stuff.
But
Like,
that is unfortunately part and parcel of this hobby. Is a lot of people, me in the early days, see it as a bit of a race. You want to get there quick. You want that ultimate tank. You want that.
I know.
coral,
Yeah.
And you have to get it wrong to realize you can't get it right doing it wrong or rushing it.
I've done it all, son. And then, taking some notes, and here I am to spread the word about what not to do.
Yeah.
But also,
going back to what I said about
ignore your
potassium,
levers.
Get your ICP result, look at your potassium, and you should be.
And then also, like, don't rest on the laurels about that. Like, all right, well, what's the QA/QC of that particular company? Are you accepting that within a mean? Are you doing like 40 ppm? But this goes back to like the initial starter recommendation dosing, knowing your tank. And this is, I think we have to be accepting of like different people with different tanks, how much time they physically spend with it, how much time they physically look at it. If we're giving advice and kind of prescriptions of behavior management, it all needs to be caveated, and then that's just built into any of my but like, I don't fault some people that, well, I look at my tank hard for like 5 minutes a week. Well, how do you safely make the changes?
Okay, so if you were to take on board what you've been talking about now with potassium, and you were going to start implementing it, i.e., adding it because your levels were low, how are you going to see improvements? What are you going to see? How are you going to see it? How can you get to a point where you look at your tank and go, my potassium levels must be a little bit low or too high?
Generally, you're going to see sad animals. Maybe things are not as colorful as they should be, and polyp extension. Polyp extension is actually kind of like and even just like, not even just if it's the polyps, some things with smaller polyps, so you just notice more properly inflated tissue.
Okay.
That is definitely like one of these number one signs. And then, and not to confuse it with like acropower or other amino acids that do elicit a fluffing response and stuff like that. But that also is the prerequisite, is at least a decent amount of potassium, so that these guys have functional capabilities to intake these amino acids. The first question I ever have, anyone with a Goniopora or anything else with unexplained tissue recession, but we know that Gonioporas do this regularly. What is your potassium? What are you dosing? What is your salt? What are your water changes? I just try to get a whole, but all right, we'll just start. And then you could use a product off the shelf. If you're worried, like I gotta hand it to like all the people that have the proper guidelines about like how to add things to the tanks. They work this out. I agree with all basic initial dosing guidelines from most of everything that I've seen, especially about anything that has potassium or contains it. If you want to be more cautious, just cut it by a quarter. Then see how everything does. Like the products that are out there that like it took a lot of work for them to even. Too much magnesium as it dissipates quickly. I don't agree. There you can have a magnesium. See, this is again. So you can't dose too much. You can. Like you're gonna mess up other things, even then you don't even want to. You actually probably create phosphate precipitates that get themselves locked into your sand or into your rock. You can overload certain systems within the coral because it can't get it to the zooxanthellae quick enough. There has been a couple studies on the Pseudodeplora clivosa that is in Florida And if they get the too much manganese too fast, especially from a man-made source due to groundwater intrusion, they die. So
wow,
yes,
so you can do
you
too
can,
much.
you can,
Right.
you know,
Okay.
yeah. It's just like you can't. I don't know, man. There's nothing that we can dose too much that doesn't kill anything other than perfect water.
You said it a second ago, though. Nothing happens, nothing happens fast, and all that, because I think that's the other thing. Little and often, maybe.
And then we all want to speed things up, and then that's been, that has also been my kind of.
But I think there is going to be a sort of caveat there where people are going to think, well, if there's all this marketing and social media hype around manganese precipitating, so if I'm just sorry,
I get you.
If people are going to be thinking, well, if I put something in on a Monday and then I leave it till Wednesday and then I do it by Friday, people are subconsciously going to question how much of that has actually gone in my tank. Oh, I'm going to put two lots in
here. Yeah. Well, like, all right. Well, as soon as you dose iron, it's mostly gone.
Yep.
Same with iodide, right? The old school thing where it's like, oh, I dose flugels or potassium iodide, I can keep my zinnias alive. It's nothing to do with iodine. It's all the potassium. I was keeping a refugium. I moved to keeping in one of my aquaculture systems. I'm all about refugiums. I love my deep sand beds if maintained correctly. But I was just getting kind of just bogged down by like too much algae getting spit up into my main system. So I was like, all right. And this is the one that system was running at that time, like between 650, 720. But I had 1,000-watt metal halide on it. 24 hours nonstop and pulsing xenia. And everyone says pulsing xenia, like for all these other reasons. This was also like a proof of fact that I kind of wanted to like, wow, if I just give it enough potassium, it's gonna be fine. Never stop pulsing, pulse like the Dickens. Like xenia collapse is from potassium, like lack of, unless
really?
I mean, that's as far as I know. For all my readings, it's the potassium. The iodine, the only time I even like consider or check iodine to make sure it's just like not off chart, like too low or whatever. And then if I'm trying to overdrive like super high acros, but so far I haven't really had a problem with it. I've never, and it's, I know it's because it's coming in other sources and stuff, but I've never had a singular necessarily, except one time. But like, I was just trying with it, but I didn't even need to. And, because the iodine is needed. It needs to be there, right? But it's so reactive, like manganese and iron for different ways, that like the useful parts don't get to anything unless it's run through the system. Like literally, and I'm not just talking about your aquarium system, I'm talking about like the different animals and the biological processes and how they stack over each other. But like coral use iodide to make vitamin C, which is an antioxidant. So when they get into high photosynthetic situations, they are having an overload of oxides, oxygen, superoxides, and hydrogen peroxide. And so then they create vitamin C from the iodide to knock that down. Also, all corals and all of them use the hydroperoxide within their cells as a immunological agent to kill things that are bad. So like it's, and that whole thing of like rides on a bleeding edge, but the coral mostly has it under control. You just don't mess it up.
You have a brain full of information. I wonder what I'd see if I looked through one of your ears, Justin. Would it be like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory?
I don't know, probably some earwax, and I'm getting old, so probably some ear hair.
Right, we are well over the hour and a half mark. We need to talk about this guy. Come on, let's talk about the star of the show. The guy,
all right, well, yeah. So let's bring it back to why I was successful with the corals, and then like my backwards kind of like coming up with this. So, I can't believe this is even it was back in the good old days. This shop used to sell monkeys and caimans, and back in the early '80s, and but one of the good old mom and pop stores. But yeah, so how I came up with the formula was like working backwards from the fact that, does anyone remember Cyclopes?
Yeah. Yes. The red stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Mhm.
was the collected some kind of lake in the
Yeah,
Arctic.
the ice from the ice lake, Arctic lake.
Yeah,
Like
and then
that.
they fished it out or Cyclopes it out. But great stuff, right? And then if you look at I had 2005 articles, but one of them I got, it was like later, I like your office assistant there, Don. We have our office cat, Stormy. Cats for attention. But so what I did is like kind of work backwards from like, all right, well, scientific process here. Like, why did these live? Why do they, what are the tools at my disposal to figure this out? Also, if it weren't for like Julian Sprung, Eric Borman, all those, early pioneers, and then and again, always hats off to Julian. Yeah, it started like his book was the first one, was just like, oh yeah, there are different species of Goniopora. Oh, they all kind of act different too. So then it was just like, oh well, I got all these things at my disposal. These things are living. Things are coming in. So working backwards, creating a matrix of like, all right, here are all the different species. These are the species that are reacting to these different prey items. Everything at my disposal. What is all the prey items that everyone reacts to and likes to eat. So, and then also like the formula is also a buoyancy and kind of like texture and stuff that can be easily consumed by the coral. And then also conversely, ideally, but not, they should be able to pass it. And that's a whole other thing with chalice power and stuff, like how the reason there was a need to come up with that, because you could, but it's like the things they all liked, things that I also specifically was just like, what I don't like to do is take frozen food out of my freezer at home. Generally, the wife doesn't like it either. Then you're mixing water, milk cups with food cups for the coral. It's stinky. It takes time. I just wanted something immediate, but also like fundamentally worked. And then what was available, and then the formula. So, so this helps you. You can't feed your way out of a low potassium situation or a low calcium situation, but this will kind of like, this will definitely make them happier. You can feed them 5 times a day with this, as long as the rest of your system is good.
So since the Goniopora extend their polyp during daytime, so should we feed the Goniopora during daytime instead of
that's
after
what I
the
do.
lights off?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a couple of weird nights when I was there at night, but but generally, like, yeah, it's and you can kind of do individual polyp feeding, broadcast feed over it, but again, so long as you're not overloading your system with stuff. More food doesn't equal more growth, as of blanket statement. You could, any too much food is just too much of anything. But yeah, so like and this is I should make more videos about this. I'm gonna have to go talk to a couple buddies, some Goniopora, and shoot some stuff. But I have a couple videos out there, but I think one of the biggest things is about kind of like seeing how the Goniopora is reacting to it, and then this could also tell you about if it's happy, and then also you can, modify your behaviors about how you're feeding it. But you'll notice that with Goniopora, each of their tentacles will curl at first. That's a initial proper feeding response. Also, we should all remember Coral 101 biology, the physiology class, is that the whole oral disc is covered in cilia. Those are cilia propping out of the cells, the epithelial cell layer, and they're all running these little hairs all towards the center polyp,
Mhm.
to the center of the polyp towards the mouth. So there are some corals like Somaliensis, Goniopora somaliensis, that really do prefer smaller food items. Some of the they actually mostly prefer bacteria and stuff. But so they're all running there, and then there's secondary reactions. So when you're feeding a Goniopora, when it's happy, it's going to do a pulse, pulse, pulse down. If you poke your pipette with the food too hard on it, what it's going to do is full pull down, and then that spreads across the whole colony like a wave, like the wave at a baseball game. But if it's a feed response, you know, especially you got it just right, it's going to like start curling some of the tentacles. It's going to be doing this pulse, 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 and then you'll notice other polyps starting to come in from the sides. And then so like if you're trying to do like a proper, I'm going to try to really jam food into this, but like part of it is also like your approach. Like you can, if you're just jamming that pipette in there. So that's also like one of these, again, bioassay, whatever, kind of like observing the behavior of the coral, So, but yeah, that's also very important. Just as far as like, do you think your coral's liking the way you're feeding it?
So you mentioned earlier, if I understand correctly, is that the potassium level also affected the polyp extension.
Oh yes, very
so
much
that
so.
means
Yeah.
that the potassium level can affect the Goniopora's polyp extension quite dramatically, right?
And that has a relationship with
Great
feeding,
word there too.
surely.
Yeah, but the getting hydromatically, like getting other ions, like these are channels for other things to come through. So again, it's like if you don't, your coral won't want to eat if it's kind of wanting to barf all the time.
So that means that before you feed your Goni, you make sure your potassium level is good enough for the Goni to actually healthy, extending their tentacle.
Yeah, like
so take care of the potassium first and then feed them.
Feeding a dying coral is not going to save it.
Yeah.
Unless it's and then sometimes hydroperoxide dip can save it if it's a localized impact or impact coming from inside the skeleton, so long as all the rest of everything in your chemistry in the system is good. Also, but that would be a dip thing. So but that's it. Like the coral can't control even the ability to eat. You can't even get its polyps out if like the potassium, calcium, alkalinity, phosphorus, nitrogen ratio is kind of off. And then also, might as well throw your manganese to the wind. And then your next door neighbor's farm is going to grow a little bit better, maybe. But
so basically, take care of all the major elements first, and then think about your the whatever this tiny little trace element
100%.
and as well as feeding. So the sequence should be major element, trace element, and then feeding.
100%, man. And that's like when your system's mature enough, it can take more food, just like a baby. You can't feed a baby 3,000 calories. But if they're fucking, pardon my French again, 6'2" and 350 pounds, they could take.
Would you not be able to feed your Gonis though through just feeding the fish?
That is also, I mean, that's technically part of the equation. I mean, but it's,
if everything else is on point.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing too. It's just like you have your balance, and then it's like if you're gonna overfeed your system by feeding something directly, then you got to keep your balances right. Like you can't, like that's the number one thing. You source water and everything's got to be there. You got to make sure like your major elements, and then eventually your trace elements, whatever to the best of your ability. And you can't feed your way out of a situation as well as you can't peroxide your way out of a situation. It's like they're both tools. Everything's a tool. Everyone's just got to like stay calm. It's like, my cobalt's off and one of my ICPs and nothing in the tank's working.
Well, this is what
so I should just throw a bunch of cobalt in there.
there's going to be a number of people that will look at their ICPs or already have done while you've been talking about potassium. I'm quite confident of that this evening / afternoon. So what should people be aiming for? Give me a range.
I'd like 420 to 450 for just kind of a nice, bottom
420 to 450. Okay.
Yeah, 420 to 450, and then that gives you wiggle room with like some of the certain tests. I mean, we're getting a shake up about what's available, but if you go for that, maybe you're 380. But also, again, don't chase numbers, chase health. Yeah. Also don't chase health too hard. But also, like, if your girls are happy, you're unhappy. Hopefully.
I think this hobby, unfortunately, though, this hobby does push people into the train of thought, as in, well, he said this, so I need to do that, and he said this, I need to do that, which is chasing numbers to an extent. But people want to just know, right? He said 420, so I've got 420. Tick. That means that my Goniopora should be happy. I'm going to feed some Goniopowder, and I think there's a knock-on effect.
It's just like, and that's why, like, I think being an ethical dealer, guru, whatever you want to call it, there's even, like, in the super scientific realm, nobody has this on lockdown technically.
Right.
Like, and we even have less tools. Each side is less tools, but yeah, I think it's know your animals.
Yeah.
How are they doing? Like,
clearly the importance of potassium is going to be on a lot of people's minds.
And then honestly, it's like you're going to have a hard time keeping your calcium up, your potassium stuff, just bottomed out. Like that's just kind of seems to be a thing. And then I don't know, maybe I'm making it up, but all the tests I see, and then like potassium's even not been, because it's not like really like a whole bunch put into the skeleton, but if it's not there, then the calcium can't get in there, right? But there are bands of potassium versus sodium depending on time of year. And like, if you don't have the basics, it's like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter first, then you can start thinking about higher things. But I really think that, and I don't know if it's me, but I've noticed that some of these ICP companies have upped their low limit for potassium to include up to like 480, which I think is completely safe. And it's all about how fast you do it. I think running out up and down too fast, trying to control it, that is almost more dangerous, but also potassium is that dangerous. Calcium you can get away with being a little bit sloppy about it, but then that's like, what are you doing? You're either chasing numbers or trying to compensate for, lack of regular interaction with your system. And it's okay if some people want to have flow and low systems, but dude, trust me, working at a pizza parlor, making pizzas all day, don't want to come home and eat pizza, let alone make it.
Okay. A few questions from the audience, Justin. Just conscious that people are asking questions here. I have 6 Gonis close to each other, but one isn't happy. What could it be? Any ideas?
It's probably unhappy. If I mean, if the other 5 are unhappy, then they're probably doing good. Like, it could be like a positional flow thing, but then now we're talking numbers of who's doing well, who isn't. And then if there's a way, just move it away. Probably be the next best thing.
Okay. Elise is saying, been keeping potassium over 400 a few months. All Gonis are just not happy.
That has a requisite of a lot of questions about all your parameters, flow, tank, light.
Okay.
So in the tank.
So on that question then, thanks, Elisa. So if somebody has got an issue with a sulking Goni, let's just say, what order of sort of, action should they take?
Well, yeah, like right here, this with the one with the 5 Gonis, happy.
Yeah.
The sixth one isn't. Obviously, the other ones are happy. So, you know, there must be other things that they're doing right with the other ones, right? So, and then to try to change the flow to make that one happy, you could be opening up a basket of worms.
Yeah.
Basket of bristle
You can
worms.
make the
There you
five
go.
not happy.
Yeah, so it's just like, all right, well, just kind of take your win on that. You know, take a chisel or clippers or whatever, just move it. Then the other thing, you know, with the you're I don't know the rest of your system, but like, yeah, I think it's, you know, to consider. Do you have happy SPS or LPS? Who's happy in the system? You know, what's your flow? Where is that Goni? You know, over 400. What does that mean in relation to all your other tests? You know, because again, everything is ratios. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of questions, and then, you know, always happy to help. But yeah, there's no one just like single quick hot answer. I know we want that to be available to us as humans, but everything is dependent on what the situation is.
I had low potassium, as low as 330. Nothing but soft coral survived in my tank until I managed to fix it. Never even crossed my mind until my first NSEP.
I'm honestly surprised even the softies grew, but maybe there's just enough. Wow. Honestly, like some of the softies are like the first ones that would tell me that something's wrong, because they do seem they have a higher potassium need, because they just have a lot more soft tissue and stuff. So, and then that's like I say again, like, you know, I would, you know, do you guys consider Xenia a beginner coral?
Yeah,
depends.
Yeah, we do it. We do in the UK.
Xenia is hard, but the one I have is a pest.
Yeah, see there, you know, so it's like I would. That's where I started correlating survival of new tanks and new hobbyists, like just basically, you know, new hobbyists, like, are they successful and stuff? But the Gonis and the softies started tanking out, like Sinularia, they all sacrificing, that are just like all these ones that grew well, totally grown in captivity for a very long time. They would kind of like be unhappy. Zoanthus too, like all at the same time. You know, so it's like, but also it's like that was the 330, so 320 was where it was at with that. We were just having problems. The easiest coral to grow, but that was that LA story of us taking the water off of, you know, between Catalina Island and LA, and it was like we had nowhere near enough.
Wow.
You know, potassium, and then it's just like, well, stuff's staying there, or the normal things aren't growing. We actually could grow a couple hard corals, but it was also not, I would say, just keeping the stasis. And
was it not mushrooms that you started to have issues with?
It was the mushrooms that were all mushrooms. It was like, wait, I know I could grow these. Why aren't they doing it? Why aren't you know, the zinnias, like, why aren't the Cladelia doing good? Like, these are just basic, you know. If they're there for more than 2-3 weeks, all of a sudden they just kind of like, you know. And it was So again, Steve Garrett.
Question from Impatient Reefer: if you have two Gonis in the same tank, similar area, so same power flow parameters, why would one be fully extended and one retracted and peed off?
Are they different?
Yeah.
Are they different species? You know, and are they in exactly the same flow? And who's upstream, downstream? Also, how is it? Yeah. And then again, I saw this philosophy with coral. If it's like doing well in a place and you can leave it there, leave it. If it's not doing well and everything else kind of checks out, is moving it an option and trying that.
Definitely.
Keep it I'm just going to grab a quick beverage to.
No, you're fine.
But I'm ready to keep going too. Here.
Yeah.
Give me 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it. We're going to count. We're counting you down. Hurry up, quick. 10, 9, 8. So potassium dong. Is that a new one for you? That interesting?
Yeah, I keep my potassium around 450 right now.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
Okay.
so because that I can tell my potassium is
10.5.
low. So I can tell my potassium is low by looking at the Oregon torque.
See, there you
Oh,
go.
really?
So this is like
The Oregon torque will be pale after it drop below 400.
There you go. Like you can't. So like
Wow.
it's not an easy standard to be like, oh, I have a number, blah blah blah. We can't. We've
But
already
if you
kind of
look at
talked
your
about
tank
this.
all the time, you're gonna pick up on
100%.
certain things, aren't
Yeah.
you? You
And again,
go out and
it's what we
see
call a
trends,
bioassay. It's a
behavior, and
bioassay.
whatever.
Look at your
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah.
Are they doing good?
Because the potassium channel is such a common thing among coral and invertebrate worms, and the 400 ppm is a major element. So you got to be doing something something important, and especially the potassium also important for the dovensis.
You both know that, but I categorically tell you now that most reefers watching this will go alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, and nutrients. They won't look at potassium.
See,
Actually, if you go to a garden store, look at the fertilizer.
See,
is that potassium level?
They've had this all figured out for a long time.
Some of them doesn't even have phosphor,
but
just
like,
potassium, nitrogen.
I have an easier time here. I could talk more expertly than I could talk about growing tomatoes. But I know for a fact that you got different fertilizers for tomatoes versus zinnias, right? I do love gardening, growing flowers, but I also don't even know the NPK ratios for all of it. But it is vitally, absolutely, crazily important. And then like also, I'm sure hopefully you guys, have. Well, you have socialized medicine up there, and you kind of have semi-socialized medicine up there in Massachusetts. Love it. So yeah, go look at all your blood tests, and just like, these are the same things that we're looking at in our own cells. Our cells are the same basic cell as a coral cell. Like you can't cheat the rules here. And then, this is why. Goniopora, I don't know. It's just hard to start a biotech right now, but Goniopora is like just perfectly designed in the way they lay their skeleton out to absorb into human flesh. Well, not flesh, but but you can't. This
compatibility.
This is basic biology. This is like the family tree. Metazoans became a thing, and then like we have even parts of our immune system, like the difference between invertebrates and shrimp and humans, but then there's still like this, like we all have the same basic DNA and the major cell types and control structures inside the DNA. Corals actually have twice the DNA and 30 times the proteins because they have to stay in one place, but we have 30 times the cell types within a cell group. But we can't get away from 300 million years ago. Like this is just basic stuff. Prick me. Do I not bleed sweet water? Thank you. Star Trek.
Actually, I think the potassium is more important than calcium because that for soft coral, mushroom, and the coral doesn't have skeleton.
Oh, it does have calcium spicules though.
Yeah, it has a little bit calcium, the little umbrella kind of thing, right? Inside.
Yeah. I also don't want to get I don't want to like have people like get whatever about calcium, but it's also like that's honestly one of the last things I grow coral like gangbusters at 380 with calcium.
This is what
but it depends on all the other things. I mean, right now because what I do find fascinating because it has to do with nearshore waters, but we just have, our calcium's coming in at like 560 straight off the bat. Also, our potassium coming in at 380, 400. That's too low, especially for the nitrogen phosphate ratio. Zero vanadium. I have to compensate.
Vanadium. Yeah. So there's an interesting
what do you
thing.
guys think about that?
Yeah. It's an
You will kill your
interesting
stuff when you try too
case
hard.
that I encounter is that I have a customer has a very high nitrogen and phosphor. The phosphate skyrocketed, nitrogen skyrocketed, and then he carbon dose, but basically has no effect. He dosed a lot of carbon. Wow, some door is opening. So
Yes, my wife is just coming home from an excursion.
We can say hello. We can say hello.
So what happened is that the carbon dosing doesn't seem to drop the nitrate and phosphate at all.
That's very interesting.
Well, then eventually he
Wait,
did an
hi.
ICP test.
Here's the
Hi,
better
how are
half.
you? Yeah.
They say hi.
So he did an ICP test because he's looking for the suspect some kind of heavy metal contamination from the heater broke down, whatever. Then it turns out his potassium only 220 ppm. Then I said, okay, well, then the since that we didn't think about anything, so why you just boost the potassium up?
Well,
Guess what?
Did he have
After
coral
1
growing?
week, the coral is stagnant. With such a the coral is not growing much. The coral basically is like shrinking, that kind of thing. So okay. The funny thing is that after when we look at the potassium level, we didn't think about it related to anything else. So we corrected the potassium level to 400 ppm. Then you can see the nitrate and phosphate started dropping.
Wow, that's actually really cool. What?
Yes.
All right, so because that's
especially the phosphate. Yeah, the phosphate on a sulfur test kit, the color is bluer than 3 ppm. There's no way you can tell. And after 1 week, you go to 1 ppm. Yeah, it's still dosing, carbon dosing, and it dropped to 1 ppm. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay. So again,
so when we correct the potassium, we didn't even think about this.
Geeks.
Well, but it's also
out.
like, all right, well, like it's also even not just eukaryotes, but prokaryotes, which is bacteria and even
I think the
all the
coral
other
is start
weirdos.
yeah, the coral start taking in the
a
nitrogen and phosphate.
Wow. So see, because this is also because I was gonna be like worried like, oh wow, did you guys like overdo the carbon dosing or something? Because you can do that, but wow, all right, that's a really very interesting thing here. So like maybe the bacteria couldn't even actually process anything.
It could be because we never even think about that part because we look at ICP. Oh, this is low. Boost it up.
Was there anything else you changed? Or is it just the?
No, because the ICP come back with all this heavy metal 000 undetectable. Nothing happened. Only thing that's shining on the paper is just very low potassium. That's it.
That's insanely low potassium too. But that's all right. So this goes to, I guess I've been on the hill about, but yeah, I mean prokaryotes like bacteria and stuff. They have also a very fundamental biology that they have to follow, and potassium is in there.
Yeah,
that's also like where. So like, see that makes sense to me, right? So then they were able to, you need potassium at a level. It doesn't always get consumed. Does not like as in.
I think sometimes you like a catalyst.
Yes, exactly. It's a catalyst. Then some of it is used in parts, but it's a catalyst. So like if it's not there, nothing happens.
Yeah.
You don't make vitamins. You can't even get ions into cells. You can't do basic stuff. Also, it will go places, so you have to add it. But
that's why we need to eat bananas.
Fascinating. I know, dude. See, like I'm getting older, and I'm like bananas make me feel good. So
can I just ask a few questions from the? Can I just ask a few questions from the audience, please?
Please do.
Time.
Yeah.
One of the questions was again from Stephen Owen regarding, which was on my list actually, pests and dips. Regarding Goniopora. So anything that you've come into contact with over the years, Justin, with Goniopora?
So if anyone's had one of those weird Goniopora worms, you just blow them off, but that's you have to like blow on them.
Okay.
Other than that, it's like peroxide, and depending on what you're using it for, if you're trying to like take impacts of either shipping stress. Ideally, this is why I'm also an advocate for captive grown, and it is worth having a named coral. You know, if it's healthy and good, and especially as long as I think the convention for naming should be that you've been growing it 2 different generations through. You're the only one that has. Nobody should be naming other people's things their thing. It gives. Yeah, we know that happens. It does give you some kind of provenance about knowing what this coral is, what it wants. But peroxide is generally the best for certain things. I mean, what are you dipping for? Revive is always like a good general pest. Everyone should dip tactically between tanks. Like if you don't know where it's coming from, wear protection. Thank you. That's also on the Reef Stock All Stars video on YouTube called Manus, which is a biology lesson. But yeah, also like, and then any pests, like there's some interesting ones. There's one I really wish I had really took more data on, but there was a Goniopora eclipse census that was coming in, and it had a nudibranch that was a obligate nudibranch on it. Very bizarre, huh? Yeah. I would.
I don't suppose it's related to the one that's I've had recently in the farm. Well, I say farm, it's nothing like farm garage. I'll just say that came on Alveopora.
Very interesting. Send me pictures. It's probably. It could be also Alveopora.
I've got a picture. I'll send it. I'll show it you now.
Yeah, Alveopora.
It was
unrelated.
Right.
Do you guys know what Alveopora is?
Yeah.
It's a.
Goniopora's cousin.
No, it's not. It's actually, unless they're wrong, it's actually an old cousin of Acropora.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, chewing that one for a bit. That's why flower pot, Alveopora have that's a whole another can of worms to crack.
This nudibranch was that big I could take it for a walk.
You know, pretty much any Nigerian probably has a nudibranch when it comes down.
Every what? Sorry?
Every Nigerian. So any kind of stingy bit creature, anemones, jellyfish. Actually, I don't know if jellyfish have nudibranchs. They probably do. Hydroids, corals. But yeah, there was this one. And then you got the Goniopora worms that aren't always bad. They're just there. I think it's all about what are you dipping for. Goniopora do pretty well with the peroxide, and then you can correct shipping internal skeletal lesions with peroxide. But ideally, you should be getting captive grown if you can.
Yeah, look at the ORA one. It's so easy to grow.
I mean, that thing's a beast. It's terrific.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like, why are certain corals like the ones that are available to us?
Yeah.
Because they grow fast, they grow well. You know, there's plenty of lottas that look way better than that one, but they don't grow. So, but it's also like, it's a great looking coral and it's awesome, man. Things bulletproof. Also, it's like there are effects that happen, notwithstanding like the changes in the skeleton that are habituated for captive growth, epigenetic changes and stuff like that, symbiont reshuffling.
I found it. Sorry to put in.
There you go. Get it. Interesting. Wow, does anyone have this subscribed?
Don't know.
Spaghetti.
It was rather large. Yes.
Well, at this point,
that was on Alveopora, and then there were like 4 or 5 of them on the time. They were massive, not like not like
Multipora
nudibranch, not like Montipora. These were really big.
Yeah,
like you could literally peel them off.
Have you guys ever come across the Xenia nudibranchs?
No.
Oh my lord, bane of my existence for a bit. They were coming in the aquaculture indos, and those guys were big. And then you had the Cladelia ones too. Basically like every coral anemone hydroid has a specialized nudibranch. As far as I can tell. And any of you guys seen the green star polyp nudibranch?
No.
Like this is, dude, bane of existence. Like they would always come in on these aquaculture pieces again. They're fascinating. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if half these aren't even described, or like just, you know, there's probably just not enough people like, you know, working the science. I missed a couple level nitrate phosphate. So right now we're it kind of ebbs and flows what we have to deal with, what's coming in the ocean, because that's my main what I'm doing right now. So we have, but I do try to keep it. Everything is also balanced, but it's coming in between 0.03 and 0.07 with the phosphate. And then nitrogen does come in like probably 3 or 5, but I get it knocked down to 0.5 just by running it through the system. And then, so I have a, like, we're almost at the, like, some of the labs have a problem where we have too low nitrate, which is, imagine that. That was the totally opposite of the good old days. And then again, like I can only speak to what I can, but we have, you know, the different ones, but it does keep close to the Redfield ratio, like with the 0.5 to the 0.05 nitrate to phosphate.
So you're quite low then on nutrients.
Well, according to a reef biologist, they would say it's pretty high. So,
okay.
You know, old school reefs. So it's, so even with that, definitely the potassium needs to be higher. So I think everyone needs to, like, I see your brain thinking about this. Like, we're literally figured out how to break all the rules with our aquariums, rules. But yeah, there's no ocean's been these certain elements this high, blah, blah, blah. We do have ecosystem in a box, but, you know, that has implications about this. But yeah, even what we're getting, because we're near shore, it's still like kind of technically too high about what like a natural reef would be. So that's also why I'm able to, because even with that low reading, I'm able to only have to. I can see a difference if it goes under 450-ish.
Do you not think though sometimes with these ICPs though, when you get this advice that says, "Oh, this is what natural seawater should be,"
well, that's
how does that relate to what it should be in a reef tank? Then
again, back to ratios.
Because surely the ratio in a reef tank should be slightly different based on its you know.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think we're all working on an easy user's guide to complex mathematical relationships.
We want to have success, don't we? We want to have fun. Otherwise, what's the point? If everything's just going to keep dying, and you know, it's stressful.
See, that's the thing. Like, I think there's and I am 100% advocate for, you know, marine aquarium reefkeeping and all this. And then it's like, how do we all do this successfully? Also, like, it should be fun, you know, unless you're getting paid for it. But ideally, also, if you're lucky enough to be like growing coral and getting paid for it, like, try to have as much fun or appreciate what's happening as possible, even though everything can be a grind. But this is such a complex, there's so many equations happening all at once that it's hard to give a straight up guideline, but there are, like, you can, you know, we specific gravity, parts per million, parts per thousand of salinity. You know, we know the basics here. pH, you know, in no uncertain terms, corals inside their cells, the specific cells that build up calcium carbonate, they have to reach 8.2 in order to dissolve calcium carbonate as well as other ions into that matrix. The lower the pH is, the more they have to work to make that happen. Also, how many ions are available? What are the tools to make those ions available? Potassium, again, rearing its head. Like, kind of basics, but, everyone, especially nowadays, everyone's like super quick bites and stuff, but I'm still buoyed that, like, the rules apply. Also, at least I have something to talk about, because every once in a while, I thought I was like, Goniopora. I got 2 years to talk about that. I got to work on something else, and then
yeah, I've had a birthday while we're doing this stream.
And peroxide. I was like, I got 2 years in each of those, and it's 20 years later. So,
Mose Reef, just clarifying, but potassium levels at too high means over 500 can kill fish. Is that all right?
It's I've had very healthy growing fish at much higher levels. I have heard of a couple of fish having
700 should be lethal.
I think that shouldn't be an issue.
I had
interesting
because
debate.
Steve Garrett had like fucking what are the big, so many fish in his tank. Like, again, this goes back to you'd actually probably give the fish a heart attack, maybe by moving them instantly into a different water with a different ion level.
But actually, there is a scientific study about the potassium level versus fish. So because that for the farming industry, they use potassium chloride to control the pest on fish farming. So the fish tolerance.
Are they using that as a dip or an additive?
No, you just a constant maintaining in the pond.
Yeah,
a level. So the level is 1400 ppm is safe.
See, there you go.
Yeah, so
and again, we
go
back to, like, if you're like a Soviet secret agent and you don't have the Novichok toxin, you can just kill somebody with enough potassium chloride.
Yeah,
it's like, but yeah, it's like, I've kept fish from everything up to 1200 and under, and then also, like, I could see it. I did have a report of somebody thinking that their fish jumped out of the tank because of potassium chloride, which makes sense because it probably like overloads their labyrinthoid organ, confuses them, and probably hurts too. But that's also why you don't raise your potassium so fast, because you're also probably going to melt your coral too. Like, you gotta take it slow. Or medium.
Yeah.
Thanks for that from Prime Corals. I peroxide dip most of my softies in LPS monthly using your guide, Justin. Thank you very much. Much love to you.
Cheers.
What else we got in here? Let's have a look. You won't ever come across a bigger pest than Tom. Trust me. That's from my brother from another mother. There we go. Right. Going back to my earlier questions that I was going to ask you, or topics, I think we've covered most of them this evening. I'm conscious of time. There was a couple more that I want to talk to you about. So, a few obvious ones with Goniopora. Lighting. Where do we stand with lighting?
Basically, medium to high unless otherwise.
Okay.
Even some of the... So, all right, let's talk about two extremes that meet in the middle. Goniopora stokesii comes... most of the ones that were collected, every once in a while, I don't even know if this is still going on right now because I'm a little bit out of the loop because I'm not in the industry the last few years, but they would come mouth of a river, very muddy, turbid waters, pretty low water requirements. Goniopora tenuitans also technically can handle low flow, also exposed to very, very bright light. Both another animal without, but both those species can exist on the reef. Basically, just shoot for the middle. I generally treat them like an SPS. Some are more SPSer than others, but let's take it out par reading. So I would just generally at least do 100, 120 to 350. You could probably push that, but it also depends on the type of light and where it's coming from. You know, are you talking LED versus blah blah blah? But also,
so they can cope with a lot more light than people realize. Then they can cope with a lot more. Clearly,
have you seen the ocean? Also, and then
I get that.
And then
people are just programmed, Justin. Sorry, from social media again. As I keep saying, they need to live on the bottom.
The more of my talks.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, also the same rule applies with. I mean, just consider aqua rules, but I mean, just like some. And again, this brings up, ask your practitioner that you're getting the coral from, if you have that available information, is to be like, oh, where was this grown? Or where was this, the guy that grew this, how was it grown? And then also follow the Goniopora rule, where like, if you're not sure, you go medium and they can move it up in the tank. Make sure it's not getting bleached out. Also, it'll probably get bleached out, but doesn't have enough potassium.
I don't think I've ever seen a reef tank though that's got Goniopora sort of medium to high sort of positioning. Because everybody goes SPS at the top. I'm just saying.
What is the Goniopora again? What is the Goniopora? An SPS.
SPS.
You know, and then also, you know, you can grow corals and all kinds of. I mean. You can do weird things with corals. So the Project X Goniopora, Fungia, sorry. You should not have it in England or somebody's breaking a law. But we got that, it's a fat Fungia that was trained in to create multiple mouths and grow encrusting growth. And then it was epigenetic changes, and it took a bunch to, you know, once those set in, it was set. But it also goes into back again to this bioassay thing. Look at your coral, know your animal. Start at the middle. You can go up or down, you know, and middle with flow, middle with light. That's just, and then if you have information about who grew it and how it was kept before you got it, even easier.
Okay. What else did I have? After lighting, then a couple more for you. We've talked about lighting, flow. Any disease? Anything that we should be looking out for with Goniopora?
I mean, this is if it's dying. There's too much to touch on here, but the coral disease is such a hot topic that, in the interest of not, there's, as of right now, technically we can't mostly define any disease. Technically, it is a failure to thrive, nothing can grow, and there's 5 different causes going into it. So that's a kind of a, you know, there isn't stony coral tissue loss as an actual causative agent. There's all kinds. There's just, go ahead and put your finger on it. It's just failure to thrive. There are, you know, white pox in Acropora pomata has been shown, and you know, for, you know, in the early 70s from human fecal bacteria. But other than that, most of it is just like you're messing up, or before you got it, somebody else messed up.
One of the things you did say you wanted to talk about a little bit tonight, which I'm conscious of time for those of you that are watching at home, but it was coloration in general.
Well, that's also, this brings it back to bioassay, potassium. That there's like little cheats. You can even plug in your colors, and once you start to know your system and know the corals you're working with, and what pigments they're setting up, and then with enough, you know, testing and information on that end, yeah, you can. But again, this goes back to like, well, first you need salt water, proper alkalinity, pH, and calcium. You know, basics. Also that don't fluctuate a whole bunch, because if you just, everything's changing all the time, they might have a hard time. But they can change a little bit, but not too much. Potassium is the base. It's the base for everything with all this too, like the metabolism, and then even getting those other ions in so that the coral can do the work to interact with the zooxanthellae, the symbionts and stuff. So let's talk about where's the color coming from. Brown starts first. Where's that coming from? Zooxanthellae. So
Yeah.
as far as we know, symbiotium, zooxanthellae. Now we can say zooxanthellae again. I don't know. Science nerds always fight a lot, but now it's okay to say this still. And then you got all the different clades. They're also not algae. They're actually technically protists, which are also eukaryote. So this should give you implications about, like what's needed there. These are higher animals technically. So then what are you going to put over the brown? And then now let's talk about, so brown are all the pigments they're required inside for photosystem 2 to work, so that these corals can get the right photons in the chlorophyll inside the protist, which is weird. We don't have enough time to talk about that evolution. But then now so photosynthesis. So you have to, so we know there's a bunch of corals out there that don't need light. They could do either or. Astringia that grows on the eastern shore. Found some in my hometown, New London. Kind of moved back in. This coral goes through cycles of being photosynthetic and non-photosynthetic. Also, there are populations in deep water that stay non-photosynthetic forever. So they have a kind of a system of requirements inside their metabolism. They're like, oh, well, it's warm enough now. I'm getting enough light. I got enough ions here. Let's ask our friends to come back in. And then it talks to its bacterial friend and pushes them to the surface, and it attracts, and then everyone gets together. But also keeping a homeostasis of potassium in the ocean is kind of easy, but with an amine. Is interesting is that ocean levels of potassium are falling possibly, but that could be based on possible testing equipment stuff and realigning what previous things are, or overall it is, but it's 20 ppm lower than it was 200 years ago. So color, like we all know, unless you have an acropora, like it's still probably going to need symbiotum to be healthy. So what goes over that brown? What are even these proteins for? The fluorescent proteins are the one that makes the color. And then a couple examples of related proteins, the chromoproteins, which the blue and the purple and the Goniopora are, but they don't fluoresce. And that's a whole different technical subject. Now, fluorescent proteins were first discovered in the bioluminescent jellyfish, and they were trying to extract why it was bioluminescing, and then they did such great work. The guy won a Nobel for it, the Japanese fellow, and what they found was like all the light luminesces blue, and then there was a green fluorescent protein right after that. Now the green fluorescent protein and all the other ones. So fun story, that was all discovered 70s. These Russian guys were in a lab in a Soviet, was it Soviet then? Yeah, it was Soviet then. And they had red mushroom anemones in a tank. I think somewhere between like 81, 83, 84, something like that. So this was the second discovered fluorescent protein. They were like, that's red. It glows under a kind of similar light. Reaction, emission, light coming in, excitation going out. So they said, can we try to do the same thing he did and pull out a protein? Boom, RFP, red fluorescent protein. So there's all these proteins and stuff. The coral needs to make them, blah, blah, blah. They're used for a reason. There's at least 2 reasons. Antioxidant, also calming down, channeling light, like just getting light to an energy state that the pigments inside.
To manipulate the wavelength.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like it's a way efficient way to do that. Also, they're also an antioxidant, like that last little dingly bit at the bottom of the barrel, does a little bit of breaking apart superoxide. So super efficient. Now each of those things you have to build. They have to be built. They need things to build them with. They need the correct metals and stuff. They also need all the amino acids and the reason to build them. So color kind of tells you everything. And then there's like, we know color means money in this business.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Colorful coral sells.
I've chased that color rainbow and I will never look back. And there can be stress colors, like Chasing Coral was so fascinating about that documentary. You could see some of the, I think it was like halfway through, but they were showing like a pre-bleaching event thing happening somewhere in the middle of the ocean.
Yes.
But it looked like a zeovit tank, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
See,
That's what it is.
And that wasn't bleaching. That was just some other ions. So
the unhealthy color.
What's that?
Is the unhealthy color right before the meltdown.
Yeah. So it's just like, and then it was like and then the way the zeovit, some of those systems worked was like you're really just trying to like just keep it right at the edge with the nitrogen.
Yeah.
And then which is, I find it fascinating as a practical experiment. But then, all right, so every coral has within itself a pre-programmed DNA that was born with that, like, I can make this protein and this protein, this protein. There are kind of ramp-ups it can do epigenetically or gene transfer agents, which is a whole different topic technically. And then you got maturation of groups of fluorescent proteins. So these are the fluorescent protein chains that are generally seen in corals like Acropora, Millipora, and stuff, and the super hyper rainbows. So that brings into the 2 different types of like color production. But it does require like the basic fundamental that you have to have super efficient functional photosynthesis, nutrient absorption, iron and manganese, all the things that are required to run those functions. And then you have like 2 kind of 3 major functions of like how these colors mature. So once you have enough of so one of the easiest fluorescent proteins for us to deal with the humans, and there's millions of patents about it, and you have anyone in your family that has cancer and maybe got treated, one of the main ways that we studied it, and it's such an efficient, easy tool, is the fact that we were to clone GFPs or all the others, any protein, we could literally dial in through random mutagenesis and then selection, and that was the old way to do it 20 years ago. And you could like dial in and radiation and emission spectrum, blah, blah, blah. But what happens in some of these corals is that, number one, you need the fluorescent protein. It needs to be made. So if you want to go from brown to green, the coral at least needs to be happy to be brown. And then it can start making fluorescent proteins. And now some of these corals, fluorescent proteins, so it's a barrel. The fluorescent protein is a barrel. And then it has a reactive dangly bit in the middle that touches the side of the barrel. And what reacts it is the photon that comes in. And it has a hinge. Now, some of these fluorescent proteins, based on the amino acids that's here on the hinge, if you keep hitting them with a certain wavelength of light, it'll change the angle of the hinge and change the color of the fluorescent protein.
So that's how the environmental light actually affect your coral's color.
Exactly. You know, and that's kind of an issue that we're having here, like LED lights, and then like, what's your peak spectrum? What's your actual wavelength that you're hitting? Also, but like just light could be our next talk, but it also does require that you're being healthy enough.
I think Justin and Dong, you should do a presentation on some of the things we've been talking together about tonight. Because Dong does an amazing presentation. If you'd be happy to come on again, Justin, it would be great for you to put some of what you've been talking about tonight in terms of illustration, so people can understand and relate when they're watching it.
Yeah, it's we'll have to do some more visual learner type stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, man, you guys are. I'm just. Thank you so much for having me on this.
Welcome.
And then
you're welcome.
I'm also still like, hey, man, I just didn't even think I'd have to like talk about the potassium things.
I think potassium sales have gone through the roof thanks to this evening. As we always say on this show, there's always something to take away. But Mr. Justin Credabel, you have been a bit of incredible. Thank you very much for joining us. And
then yes, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for asking me on. And this is we can have follow-ups.
Definitely do a follow-up. I'll talk to Dong.
I'm kind of busy, but you know, it's but this has been stimulating.
I think we need to put method to the madness almost, as in illustrative presentations, baby-sized, bite-sized pieces that people can understand, because you're going to get that question, but why, but why, but why? And I think
we need a flow. We need a visual flow chart, but also where is that? It hasn't happened yet. It's a lot to bite off.
Yes. The minute people understand it and understand why, they're more likely to do it. The more they do it, the more they're going to have success. The more success they have, the more they enjoy it.
There you go. And I think this comes back to the point, look at your animals.
Yes.
How are they doing? Nerd term bioassay.
I think my wife needs more potassium. I
think that's between you two, but like I'm happy to advise on that. I need an ICP test and how much flow she has. What's her lighting regimen?
Did you say an ICP or an ICP? Okay. Anyway, on that note, Mr. Justin Credabel, thank you very much. You have been incredible for sure. Thanks for sharing your amazing knowledge on Goniopora. You are going to come back as always. Thank you very much to my co-host Dong this evening, this afternoon, this Friday.
Thank you to everyone around the world.
Of you that have tuned us around the world. We do thank you for tuning into the Reefers Network as always. We will see you next Friday. Dong's going to be doing a Q&A with us, catching up on some of the slides and some of the streams that we've done in the past few months to answer some of the questions that we haven't been able to answer to the live audience. We look forward to seeing you then. But other than that,
and buy Goniopowder.
Buy Goniopowder. Have an amazing weekend, whatever you get up to.
Whatever country you're in, I'm sure it's there.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.
Guys,
have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.